it's Deputy, you asked for Mayor McDougall, she's not here.
Yeah, she's
Councillor Gordon McDonald,
here.
Deputy Mayor McMullen,
Here.
Councillor Cyril McDonald,
Here.
Councillor Gillespie,
Here.
Councillor Eldon McDonald,
Here.
Councillor Fruit,
Here.
Councillor Carson,
Here.
Councillor Edwards,
Here.
Councillor Tracy,
Here.
Councillor Brooksweiger,
Here.
Councillor O'Quinn,
Here.
Councillor Green.
Here.
Thank you, Angela. And for those who are able, please stand for the singing of Canada, which was recorded by Cassidy Riley and accompanied by Aaron Lewis for use at our council meeting.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command, car t'embrasse et porter le pays, il sait porter la croix, ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants d'espoir. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Next is approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Move it.
Moved by Councillor Brooksweiger
Second.
and seconded by Councillor Tracy. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion's carried. So next on the agenda is proclamations, and we'll begin with the 10th anniversary of Project Lifesaver Association of Nova Scotia, and I'll pass it to Councillor Darren Brooksweiger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Be it therefore resolved that the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, Mayor and Council extend thanks and appreciation to all members and volunteers of Project Lifesaver Association of Nova Scotia, especially the GSAR team and volunteers here in our community, Cape Breton Search and Rescue, for their dedication on the occasion of the 10th anniversary on bringing loved ones home in the province of Nova Scotia and here in our community, and I so move, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Seconded.
And seconded by Councillor Eldon McDonald. On the
Thank
motion?
you. Yes, on the motion, Madam Chair. Whereas Project Lifesaver Association of Nova Scotia celebrates the 10th anniversary of bringing loved ones home across the province of Nova Scotia. The program designed to assist with locating individuals who live with cognitive disorders such as Alzheimer's disease, autism, are at risk to wander. And whereas Plans is a charitable and nonprofit organization dedicated to providing assistance and responding to the challenge of caregivers living with individuals who may wander or bolt. And whereas clients who are part of Project Lifesaver program wear a 1-ounce battery-operated radio transmitter that emits a unique automatic tracking signal every second, 24 hours a day. Should a client become missing, the caregiver has been instructed to immediately contact 911 police, and police will respond and contact Ground Search and Rescue. That team, whose members who are already trained in traditional search and rescue techniques, have the training in Project Lifesaver response with radio frequency tracking receivers to quickly locate the missing person. And whereas Project Lifesaver requires a minimum of 2 searchers and the recovery has been an average of under 30 minutes. And whereas the Cape Breton Search and Rescue is a member team of plans and their volunteers received Project Lifesaver training for the first time in November 2011 and became operational as the plans team in April 2012 and became operational as plans teams in April of 2012 in honor of the late Rhoda Snow, Sydney River in 2004, who lived with Alzheimer's, and James Delory, South Bar in 2009, who lived with autism, both who tragically died after wandering from their homes. And whereas today, there are 160 Project Lifesaver clients across the province of Nova Scotia, and 41, that's a quarter of the provincial number of clients in Cape Breton Regional Municipality, Madam Mayor. If I could, Madam Mayor, I myself and I think some former councillors, we went out on one of the searches in the early years with the group. It was just fantastic to see that type of technology and what it can do to help locate a loved one if they're gone missing. We're very fortunate with one of our own, Sharon McSween, who is a part of the Ground Search and Rescue group and just spent the whole weekend in training members of their group with this here technology, which I think is fantastic. So Ground Search and Rescue here are a great group of volunteers, and we're very lucky to have them, Madam Mayor. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, Councillor Bruckschweiger. And just a note, in respect for our Mayor, Amanda McDougall, I'm deputy. So, but I have been called much worse, so thank you, Councillor Bruckschweiger. Any further discussion on the motion?
Question?
Questions called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against, no? Motion carried. So, excuse me, we'll now move on to 2.2, International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and I would call on Councillor Gordon Mcdonald to introduce this proclamation.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. If the council will indulge me, I'd like to read all the whereas before I get to the be it therefore resolved. So whereas December the 3rd has been declared by the United Nations as International Day of Disabled Persons, and whereas the day is an opportunity to promote the rights and well-being of persons with disabilities in all spheres of society and development, and to increase awareness of the situation of persons with disabilities in every aspect of political, social, and economic and cultural life. And whereas the Accessibility Act was passed in Nova Scotia in 2017 and emphasizes that accessibility is a human right. And whereas persons with disabilities comprise 30.4% of the province's population, and whereas CBRM is committed to accessibility, ensuring that people of all ages and abilities enjoy the same opportunity as they live, work, visit, and invest in our communities. Be it therefore resolved that Mayor Amanda M. McDougall and Council of the CBRM proclaim December the 3rd, 2020 as International Day of Persons with Disabilities in the Cape Breton Regional Municipality. And I so move.
Seconded.
Seconded by Councillor Cyril McDonald. So moved by Councillor Gordon McDonald and seconded by Councillor Cyril McDonald. Any further discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? And motion is carried. So we'll now move on to the addendum, Shop Local Day 2.3, Thursday, December 10th, 2020, and I'll call on Councillor Steve Gillespie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I will read the operative clause and then ask to come back. Be it therefore resolved that Mayor Amanda M. McDougall and the Council of the Cape Breton Regional Municipality declare Thursday, December 10th, 2020, as Shop Local Day here in CBRM, and we encourage everyone to support your local retail businesses. And I move.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Green. In discussion, Councillor Gillespie?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Shop Local Day, Thursday, December 10th. Whereas the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic has affected the commercial sector worldwide, including our own CBRM, to a point where long-term effects may yet be seen. And whereas a number of local businesses have experienced challenges this year, and supporting local businesses in our area is key to making opportunities out of these challenges. And whereas every dollar we spend locally this holiday season will have a positive ripple effect on our own economy for years to come. And whereas, in response, the Cape Breton Partnership launched the hashtag Cape Breton First concept, encouraging residents to shop, stay, and eat local during this holiday season and into 2021. And whereas, every dollar spent on the island contributes to a better Cape Breton for all of us.
Thank you, Councillor Gillespie. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay, question's been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. So now on to item 3, heritage property issues. I would call on Heritage Officer and Senior Planner Karen Neville to introduce this issue.
The public hearings before council tonight were originally scheduled for March 24th, 2020, but were postponed due to the COVID pandemic. Prior to presenting information on each of the requested registered properties, because there are a number of new councillors, I thought I would give a general overview to let you know how we got to this point today. Cbrm's authority to address heritage issues comes from the Provincial Heritage Property Act. While Cbrm has several policies and bylaws related to heritage, tonight I'm only going to give you a quick overview of the policy related to property registration. If individual councillors have specific questions about the other policies and bylaws, feel free to contact me. When it comes to heritage property registration, we look to the policy respecting criteria for heritage property registration. This policy provides detail and specific criteria to assist both staff and members of the Heritage Advisory Committee when evaluating requests for heritage designation. So when we receive a request, staff will evaluate and research and score based on the criteria in the policy. This information is then presented to the Heritage Advisory Committee, who is responsible for making a recommendation to council with regards to property registration. Upon receiving a recommendation from the Heritage Advisory Committee, a council will review the request and determine if it's reasonable to proceed with registration. If registration is deemed to be reasonable, the property owner is notified and a public hearing is set.
Excuse me, Ms. Neville?
Yes.
I just want to draw council's attention, for those that aren't aware, that the slideshow she's working with is being displayed
thank
on
you.
the wall up there. So,
And unlike other public hearings of council, when a property is being registered, only the property owner is allowed to address council at a public hearing. So that's different than other public hearings you'll be seeing before you. So then following the public hearing, the final heritage status is then registered at the registry office, and then the process is complete. So now that I've given you the quick overview, I'm just going to jump into the presentation for the Dominion Italian Hall. So the Planning and Development Department did receive a request to register the Dominion Italian Hall as a municipal heritage property. For those that are not familiar, there is a map on your screen. It's a little difficult to see, but the property is outlined in red on your screen. While the building is not an exceptional example of a particular architectural style, the Dominion Italian Hall does score high on historic and cultural significance. The Dominion Italian Hall has been a fixture in Dominion and a source of Italian culture since it first opened its doors. Therefore, it's reasonable to consider this building as municipal heritage property. During the January 20th, 2020 Heritage Advisory Committee meeting, the Heritage Advisory Committee passed a motion advising that council initiate the process to register this property. On February 18th, council passed a motion to initiate the process for registration. As stated earlier, the only property owner that can address council at the public hearing tonight is the property owner, and they were notified of their opportunity to provide a written submission for tonight's consideration, but decided to rely on their original submission and not provide additional comments at this time. So based on the recommendation from the Heritage Advisory Committee, I recommend that council register the Dominion Italian Hall as a municipal heritage property.
So moved. Madam Chair.
so moved by Councillor Bruckschweiger and seconded by Councillor Elder Mcdonald. to approve the request to register the Dominion Hall, 14 Gatto Street, Dominion, as municipal heritage property. Discussion on the motion, Councillor Bruchschweiger.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and COVID-19 has certainly set us back a little bit on this one, but as Karen pointed out, everything was in motion, and, you know, I'm so proud of the Italian community. Just great people. As pointed out, they landed here, and they were one of the biggest populations one time this side of Montreal, so the largest population in the country, actually. So, and like a lot of people, they came here and they went to the coal mines, and that was their work. They built this building in early years, and a lot of people here will know it for the, you know, famous Italian dinners, chicken dinners, and certainly a big crowd pleaser. Anytime one is called, the tickets are sold out usually the same day. So it's a going concern. It's a great community group, and I want to thank Karen and staff for the work in getting this ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Gordon McDonald.
Yeah, for my own curiosity, I'm just wondering, like, after when these buildings are given heritage designation, and are these buildings up to spec by this time when they're getting this status, or are they going to be brought up to spec? And should that happen, in this case, it looks like there's a committee that owns the building itself. So what happens if this committee decides that they fold, or they're no longer invested in this building? What happens to that building? Does that cost revert back to the Cbrm? And like and if it is a heritage building, you've got a bigger chance to be able to become dilapidated and overgrown and things like that. So is there like a follow-up after they get designated to this capacity?
Yeah, so when a property is registered as a heritage property, it doesn't go with property ownership once the registration is in place. So if the property was to change hands to someone else, the heritage designation still stays in place unless someone requests that the property be deregistered. So there's a process under the Heritage Property Act with regards to deregistration of a property. And in relation to a heritage property becoming dilapidated, one of the aspects of the policies that we have within the Cbrm is municipally registered heritage properties are eligible for a grant to do exterior renovations to the building. So that's something that council generally approves every year at budget time. So it's not a large budgetary item, but it is something that heritage properties are eligible to apply for.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion or question?
Question?
Okay. Prior to that, Councillor Bruchschweiger, I just want to verify, you did mention, but there is no additional
Correct.
comment from the property owners in this case?
Correct.
Okay. Question's been called. Those in favor?
Aye.
And those against? Motion is carried. So we'll now move on to the Grand Narrows Waterfront.
Great, thank you. The Planning and Development Department did receive a request to register the Grand Narrows Waterfront as municipal heritage property. And again, there is a map on your screen outlining the property in red. While many of the buildings on the property have undergone extensive renovations and are not necessarily original to the historic development, aspects of the old ferry dock infrastructure still do exist. Due to the fact that many of the existing buildings are not being considered as a part of the criteria for registration, the property did score low on the criteria. That being said, the scoring criteria is meant to be a guide for a decision, and it's not unreasonable to request that the property itself and not any of the actual buildings be registered as heritage property. So in this case, we're looking at registering the property and the old ferry dock infrastructure and not any of the buildings currently on the property. During the January 20th, 2020 Heritage Advisory Committee meeting, the Heritage Advisory Committee did pass a motion advising council to initiate this process. And again, at the February 18th meeting, council did pass a motion to initiate registration. And again, in accordance with the Heritage Property Act, only the property owner is able to speak at the public hearing. They were notified of their opportunity to provide written submissions this evening, but decided to rely on their original request, so no additional comments were received. So based on the recommendation of the Heritage Advisory Committee, I recommend that council register the Grand Narrows property at 415 Grand Narrows Drive, as well as the ferry infrastructure dock as a municipal heritage property.
Move.
Moved by Councillor Cyril McDonald,
Second.
seconded by Councillor Parsons. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a question of clarification. As it relates to the criteria, and I understand that we don't solely base it on what we've laid out here, but when you look at this particular one, I'm just trying to get a general understanding of where the baseline is, because if you look at the 12 variables that include as a recommended guide, this particular one doesn't meet 8 of 12, which is 65%, and I think that's a high number in terms of what our baseline status. I guess my ultimate question is, at what point in time do we say no?
Yeah, so if you look at the scoring criteria, it does make reference to they should at least score 50 points. This one did score 45. And the reason it did score so low is because there wasn't a building that we could make a reference to from either an architectural point of view or a historic point of view. But the property itself did serve the area in an historical context with regards to transportation between communities. So that's the reason why, even though it only scored a criteria of 45, that it was deemed to be reasonable to proceed.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Cyril McDonald.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd just like to make a comment that the Grand Narrows waterfront is definitely a staple in the community and a staple in surrounding communities, and I'm very pleased to see this recommendation come forward, and that I hope Council will support the motion on the table and make this a heritage property.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other discussion on the motion? Oh, Councillor Parish.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd just like to add to what Cyril said there. I have a bungalow up around there, and I know as a kid when the ferry was operational that maybe this place didn't score very high with the points, but to the people in the surrounding areas up there, I know that it's a very special place, and even to now, some of the services that they offer go far and wide. If lots of people up there have bungalows where they might not have running water, there's running water and things like that there, so I think it is a near and dear thing to the Grand Narrows and Iona area, so I support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion?
Question?
Okay, and with no additional comments, question's been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion's carried. And we'll move on to C, St. Joseph's Catholic Parish Church.
Thank you. The Planning and Development Department received a request to register the St. Joseph's Catholic Parish Church located in Albert Bridge as a municipal heritage property. Again, there is a map on the screen behind you where the property is outlined in red. The photo on the screen is the church's original construction. The original building was simple in its design and elements and has elements of Scottish and Gothic building styles. In and around 1978-79, the church underwent significant renovations. As you can see, the building size were enlarged and it no longer maintained that small rural church style. And the photo on your screen now is a more current representation of the exterior of the church. Due to renovations, the church no longer retains that simple rural church architectural style. However, due to the age and the significance of this building within the community, it's reasonable to consider this as a heritage property. During the January 20th, 2020 Heritage Advisory Committee, the Heritage Advisory Committee did pass a motion advising Council to initiate the process for registration. And again, on February 18th, Council passed a motion to initiate this process. The property owner was notified of their opportunity to address Council at the public hearing this evening. But again, other than their original request for registration, they had no additional comments. So based on the recommendation of the Heritage Advisory Committee, I recommend that council register St. Joseph's Catholic Parish Church as a municipal heritage property.
Thank you. So to approve the request to register St. Joseph's Catholic Parish Church at 2735 Trout Brook Road in Albert Bridge. Do we have a, moved by Councillor Edwards,
Second.
seconded by Councillor Tracy. Any discussion on the motion?
Question?
Question's been called, and with no additional comments by the property owners. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? And motion carried. And on to D, Bernie's Bakery.
Okay, the final registration before you this evening is Bernie's Bakery. The Planning and Development Department received a request to register Bernie's Bakery located in Whitney, Pierre as a municipal heritage property. The map on your screen does show the property location. Bernie's Bakery is valued because of its high significant cultural value within the community of Whitney, Pierre. Therefore, it's reasonable to proceed with designation. The building itself is simple in its design, and it has retained its original design since construction. There's a historic photo on the screen and a more current showing it still retains the same architectural style when it was originally constructed. During the January 20th, 2020 Heritage Advisory Committee meeting, the Heritage Advisory Committee did pass a motion indicating or advising council to initiate the process for registration. And on February 18th, council passed a motion to proceed with this process. Again, the property owner was notified of their opportunity to address council at the public hearing. And other than the original written submission, no additional comments were received. So based on the recommendation of the Heritage Advisory Committee, I recommend that council register Bernie's Bakery located at 12 Meadow Street in Whitney, Pierre as a municipal heritage property.
And I so move, Madam Chair, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Second.
Okay, so motion moved by Councillor Green and seconded by Councillor O'Quinn. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Green.
On the motion, just for councillors that aren't aware of the significance of Bernie's Bakery, the people obviously listening will understand the significance of it. Bernie's was quite famous for its pizza. I wasn't particularly a fan of it because it didn't have meat on it. So, but quite popular in its day. And one of the local bakeries in the community actually tries to replicate it now. It's one of our little grocery stores. It's Jones Food Town. And so if anybody gets a chance and an opportunity to be in the Whitney Pierre area, I'd encourage you to at least try it. Like I said, I wasn't a fan of it because it particularly didn't have meat. And from somebody who was a vegan at one time, not now, but it's quite a significant building. The bread was amazing. You know, all the products that came out of there was, you know, it was really difficult to get sometimes because it would sell out so quickly, as Darren mentioned about the hall in Dominion. It's same metaphor here that, you know, when things were made, a certain product was made, and they were only made on special days, and they would sell out relatively quickly. So it wasn't uncommon to see a lineup, and everybody knew when Bernie's Bakery was making their bread or the pizza. People knew because the lineup was significant. So it's quite pleasing to see the heritage designation for this particular building, and Bernie's Bakery, I'm sure, will live on, and I wouldn't be surprised if it revived itself.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Eldon Mcdonald.
Thanks very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just through you to Karen. Karen, I'm just wondering, I know back when we originally had this before the Heritage Committee, there was some discussion where the family was looking at possibly doing some renovations and upgrading the building and possibility of a business being operational out of that current location. I know COVID changed a lot of things, but has there been any further discussions with the family in that regards, or is it just basically the information you had back then is still the same?
Yeah, so I did touch base with the property owners with regards to tonight's meeting, and you're correct, COVID did put their plans on pause. They still have great aspirations, but they're not sure the timeline for those.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Gillespie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, but my question was just answered, so thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? So on the motion to approve the request to register Bernie's Bakery of 12 Meadow Street, Whitney, Pierre as a municipal heritage property. Question? Question's been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? And motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda, under corporate services, issue item 4.1 is a presentation for New Aberdeen Revitalization Affordable Housing Society. I would ask Alistair Moore to come forward to present. I do know it's just going to take a moment for them to switch up the slides there, so just allow a little transition time.
Deputy Mayor, should I sing to entertain everyone while we're transitioning?
You could, but I'm worried that that may cause a point of privilege for those around you, so we will pass. But thank you for the suggestion, Councillor Gillespie.
You're welcome.
Just the up and down? So just go down.
Madam Deputy Mayor, administrators, council, thank you for the invitation. As was mentioned, this presentation deals with the New Aberdeen Revitalization and Affordable Housing Society, which was formed a few years ago, and I'll give you a little bit of the history, if I could. Back then, the center of New Aberdeen was the most dilapidated area in the Cbrm. Buildings were demolished. In fact, I think at the time there were 17. The land was cleaned up, and it was tried to be, I think they went through 3 tax sales, and of course it didn't sell, and it became surplus land. So somewhere along the way, and I always give Councillor Brooksrecker credit for this, I don't know if he deserves it, but he accepts it. A decision was made, or an idea was presented, that perhaps we could create a nonprofit organization that could recycle this land at a lower cost and perhaps just initiate some development there. As it turned out, that's what happened, and the organization was called the New Aberdeen Revitalization and Affordable Housing. Quite a handle, long enough to be I guess almost like a communication statement, run on diesel. But we realize that successful community revitalization involves more than just selling land. It begins with the philosophy, and there are 2 possibilities. The first one is we can't expect much from people from that area, pretty negative, and it fit the area at the time. Or whatever it takes, we're going to make a difference in the area and in the lives of the residents. And of course, that's the one we chose. To do that, we looked at the social factors that shape our lives, beginning with distal factors, and there weren't many in New Aberdeen. And that's communities with schools, churches, facilities, programs that provide a sense of belonging, free of stress, abuse, and fear, to reduce the risk factors that contribute to the cycle of triple poverty and the Matthew effect. And I'll deal with those a little later on. And the proximal factors, the interpersonal relationships between parents, teachers, students, coaches, mentors, group leaders that provide a positive learning experience and build a sense of acceptance and community pride. And that's where we really come in, I guess, and that's where we've been. Because if you notice when on the slide, I'll go back a couple here, if I could. I'm trying to. Here. Aside from being the most dilapidated and the buildings demolished and so on and so forth, there was a very, very visible, dangerous presence of the Hells Angels in the area. They pretty well controlled it. There were 4 murders, 1 kidnapping, 1 suicide, and 4 incarcerations in that little community. all connected to the Angels. All of them. All stores were closed. 2 of 5 children were living in poverty. In the center section, I'd say it was 2 of 3. The 2 elements, I guess, institutions in the community that we had, one was John Bernard Croak PC Memorial School, and at the time, I was in a dogfight to keep that school open because across the street was this huge town special needs daycare, which automatically guaranteed us a primary class every year. As it turned out, and I thank Lauren and Stevenson, and that did happen. And right now, that school, when you walk into that school, there's an atmosphere there that's totally positive. It's a beautiful school. And the daycare, just to fill you in a little bit, it's not just a large daycare, it's a special needs daycare. In fact, the model was housed at the University of Winnipeg for about 3 years under the direction of Lloyd Axworthy. And the plan was, if the Harper government had instituted a national daycare program, that was to be the prototype, that daycare. So there were pluses, but not much. So what we decided to do was to try to penetrate that poverty thing, reduce it, by offering programs to the community where everybody was welcome. And I'll get you, stick with me for a minute. What happens to the brain, it's called a schema, when you are stimulated, you're involved, you're accepted, free of stress. The dendrites multiply. When you aren't, at the end of each of the 3 brain development stages, they're pruned, just like the berry bushes. And you're left with this, a very similar model to PTSD. And when those kids go to school, they face what's known as triple poverty. Everybody knows the economic poverty. You know, it's too much month at the end of the money. The poverty of exclusion. But that leads to stress-induced poverty. And that's a terrible word, stress. The ACEs are high, adverse childhood experiences are high. Neglect, frequent moves, dependency, abuse, violence, fear and yelling, and so on, which in turn leads to literacy or word poverty, because there are fewer books in those homes. Those children have a weak vocabulary, and their schema is underdeveloped. And the schema is a multitude of processes in the brain that allow you to process a multitude of events into a single solitary event so that you get the main idea. It's like discernment. It helps you make better decisions. They usually hit the grade 4 reading slump and the bigotry of low expectations, a loss of hope, and dreams die. And that door we call education, the door of success, for them is closed for many cases. And they become third world citizens. And their choices are very limited. And this is no Aberdeen back then, in many cases. Gangs, socialist system, or the law. And we had plenty of it. But when we started, we realized that there was not much there to work with as far as facilities. But we went ahead, and about 3 years ago, we happened to make a contact with Reverend Alison Etter. Alison is the minister, warden, and Knox United. And through her, formed a powerful partnership with the Warden United Church. It's been amazing. Open door all the way. Cletus O'Neill took the courageous step of reopening a convenience store. And I'll tell you, he's had 3 years of hard struggle, but it's building and it's building well. And he's become kind of a godfather to the group. Whenever you need something, you don't have to ask. We also connected with the daycare center. Of course, we have their permission to use the land for a garden plot and so on next to the store. The other connection that we made was the affordable housing and renovation project to the college out here. And what that does is it identifies houses where people are struggling and they have small rental needs but don't have the money. And we send in a worker who assesses the situation, comes up with a cost, and between the affordable housing group, ourselves, and Warden Church, it's covered. So far, we've had 3. There are more on the books. The next one is the food bus. That's been an overwhelming success. In fact, we have the biggest turnout in all their stops. They're always cleaned out. Been great to work with them. Again, Warden Church is the focal point. We also received tremendous support from Angela Houston down at Tallow. Take a load off. Angela's from New Aberdeen, moved back there. And she's behind us usually whenever there's an event. And I kind of had to scold. I apologize for not saying this earlier, but Jennifer Ludlow is our chairperson, and Jennifer does most of the work in the background. She's in Halifax. She got a call. That medical appointment was due today. She didn't have much choice. But I noticed on the partnerships, when I sent this PowerPoint to Jennifer, she called in a panic. I need a presentation. Can you do it? Yeah, I said, I'll send this to you. Take a look at it, edit it, send it back to me, and I'll do the final draft. 2 days later, I called, and she said, I had to send it in. They want it. So what we have is a little bit out of sequence, but we'll go with it. So I mentioned to her the other day, I said, do you realize that you missed your partnership with the Lighthouse Church and the Undercurrent Movement? They have been supportive with us in a way, with people, bookkeeping, the whole thing. It's been a tremendous partnership. Dave Soller is. So it went from there to what can we do in projects? Well, the first thing we get into is a community garden, which was a different type of project. It was, I would say, moderately successful, the garden itself, but the children, young people that we work with, from the backgrounds that were pretty rough and pretty limited, the work that they put in that summer to do that job, that was really the rewarding part. And from there, we instituted what's known as New Aberdeen Days, and I'll put that up in a minute. We have snow sculpturing, and I have to apologize for the fact that caroling is spelled wrong. Anybody notice? 2 R's. So I said, not edit. We also have a fuel assistance program where we assess needs and we pick the 4 greatest needs that we donate, usually $250 in oil. Through the partnership with the renovation group, and we put out a newsletter. We were actually got some funding through the Tompkins Institute this summer. We put out a community newsletter. It's been very successful. It does the history part, the day part, and advertises what's coming up. It's delivered to the door of everybody in New Aberdeen through the saltwater system. The food bank, a food bus flyer is delivered every day to someone that we pay door to door. And like I said, these have been very, very successful programs. Keep in mind where we came from. Now, this is our very first New Aberdeen Day, and that picture was taken somewhere between 8:30 and 9 in the morning. We didn't know what to expect, but every table was filled, and by the time it ended, this is the very first time, by the way, I don't know how many years that something like this has been held in New Aberdeen. It's got to be 30 years or more. But by the end of the day, before noon hour, there were 400 plus people through there. It was an amazing success. Darren was there. The food bus, as I said, it's a regular visitor. And while it's there, we usually have a flea market going. It's well attended. Now, this is the garden plot the following year. And in the background, you'll notice a side view of the daycare. It's on the corner of 3rd and West. Warden is on the corner of 5th and West. On that day, during the Aberdeen days, this is one of 3 stops. This is very, very early in the morning, but it was a beehive all day there as well. And on Lower 4th Street, we had a pop-up gallery. Very questionable whether it would be successful, but the numbers visiting was high, very high. Now, if you take a look at this photo here, you'll notice that it's not very clear, I understand. There is very little there but cleared land, and that always concerned me. And the garden was named after Darrell Flynn, former councillor, by the way. So I'm going to just remember this spot. That is the garden. And up in the right corner there, you'll see Councillor Mcdonald, Councillor Brookswacker, Dave McKeegan, and Jennifer Ludlow. And over on the far left, the man in the gray T-shirt is probably one of our greatest assets on this island. Dave Soller, Pastor Dave Soller. If there's anybody here in this island who has counseled more teens away from suicide than him, I'd like to meet him. He's amazing. Now, where we go from here, one of the things that always caught my eye when I went through New Aberdeen was the absence of trees and shrubs. It was just bleak. It just wasn't there. I said, there's something missing here. What is it? There's no color. There's no background. There's no life. So the plan is to turn that garden into something not quite as bulky as that, but with a centerpiece, something like this, where whenever there is an event, whether it's a graduation, a wedding, an anniversary, a picnic party in the summer, this would be your photo spot. It's next to the dairy. It's on West Avenue, corner 3rd. Great spot for it. I'm just going to leave you with this before I sit down, this message. This is kind of where we were when we first had to look at things and, how are we going to do this? But the whole truth is, and each of us has the ability to be the change that we want to see if you take it one step at a time. It's been a lot of steps, but it sure as heck please be there. The other thing I want to mention too is that I want to thank Councillor Brookswacker. He's always been there for us. Sheila. We have sold a lot on 9th, one on 7th, one on 6th, one on 4th, and Sheila's about to present one this evening, the second one on 7th. We have 2 mini homes. One is the mobile type, about 40-footer, beautiful. And we have the mini home, the first one. And I was kind of amazed and shocked at the same time because it took me by total surprise. I've been I'd seen a program on these homes coming from BC, and they were using this Japanese smoke and flame technique to color them. I thought it was kind of unique. I'm driving up, I think it's 4th Street, and sure enough, there it is. Right out of Woodstock, but beautiful. These people, amazing people, they have been traveling, working across Canada, working on environmental projects that have gone awry. When they purchased a home, they were actually in BC. When they purchased the land, they were actually in BC. They pulled that thing across the country. They're well adopted in the community, get along well, they're good people. The other on 4th Street was clearing the land the last time I was up there, planning to build. I haven't been back since then, I've been busy. But, and I understand the lot that Sheila's going to ask you to quit claim tonight is the second one on 7th Street, beautiful lot. And I want to end by saying, if this isn't a success story, I haven't seen one. It's a great one. The other thing, too, is that we continue to get requests I've been amazed. And of all places, Kijiji. That's where we sold most of them. We've had requests from a brother, a man formerly from Aberdeen, living in Ontario, and his plan is to sell a home in Ontario, move home, and build 2 small homes, one for himself, one for his brother. We have a lady from New Aberdeen who teaches in Newfoundland, comes home in the summer. Her plan is to take a lot and build a small home. Now, the reason they didn't buy the lots right now is that they won't be retiring for a few years, and of course there's the 1-year stipulation that you have to build, right? That's where we are. So I think the future is good. And I really, it's been a great, I wouldn't call it an adventure, but it's certainly been a great experience. And the one thing that has always puzzled me is that when I'm involved with community things like this, we have been blessed with a community of strong women. I don't see many men. I don't know where they are, but our women are strong. And thank God they are, because that's what's bringing us back. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. And as far as purchasing land on Kijiji, I did it myself, and it is now my favorite spot on the planet, so I get it. Well, now, next on the agenda, perfect follow, is a request from New Aberdeen Revitalization Affordable Housing Society. I would ask Sheila Kalanko, Property Manager, to introduce the issue.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, Council. First, thank you, Alistair, for a lovely presentation and all the wonderful work you, Jennifer, and everyone else does. On behalf of staff, thank you. So Cbrm received a request from the New Aberdeen Revitalization Society on October 30th, requesting Cbrm convey a lot of land identified on page 52 of your agenda package for consideration of $1. The parcel, as Alistair alluded to, and some of you may be aware, the Society has developed a working relationship with Cbrm with an understanding that if the Society entices family to invest in residential development within the New Aberdeen area, Cbrm would entertain conveying surplus land to the Society for $1. The property is currently listed in the Cbrm's inventory as surplus to the needs of the municipality. The Society has been contacted by an individual who currently resides in the Cbrm and wishes to move to the New Aberdeen area. The Society has secured the sale subject to the property, provided Cbrm agrees to convey the land for nominal consideration. The proposed purchaser wishes to purchase a new mini home and locate it on the property, and the Society has confirmed they've secured a deposit. The Planning Department has advised the property is currently zoned to permit a mobile home on the property, subject to applicable provisions of the Land Use Bylaw and issuance of a building development permit. I would like to note that the Society has received interest from other individuals seeking to place similar mini homes on the property, and staff deem that this will have a very positive impact on the redevelopment in the area. The Municipal Government Act permits municipalities to sell at a price below market value to a nonprofit organization that council considers to be carrying on an activity that is beneficial to the municipality. We've been advised by Paul Burr, Manager of Buildings and Plannings and Licensing Laws, that he has been in regular contact with the Society in their recent activities. He's confirmed that he fully supports this request and the positive work of the Society. So I'm here tonight to bring forth a recommendation to Council to approve a motion to convey the property identified herein to the New Aberdeen Society for $1. The conveyance shall be subject to the application for a building permit within 1 year, and all the costs will be the responsibility of the Society.
I move it, Madam Chair.
Second.
So moved by Councillor Gillespie and seconded by Gillespie. I'm looking right at you, Councillor Bruchschwager. and seconded by Councillor Tracy. On the motion to approve the request to convey the property identified as PID 1544-0001, 7th Street, Glace Bay, vacant land, to the New Aberdeen Revitalization Society for $1. The conveyance shall be subject to application for a building permit within 1 year, and all costs will be the responsibility of the society. Discussion on the motion, Councillor Bruchschwager.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And like I said, earlier, and this is basically 8 new faces around the table. And what you've seen and just witnessed before us is an organization that had a deep, genuine concern about the area. We worked, when I was elected to that particular area, Madam Chair, in 2012. I can tell you that I seen the issues there myself, and I just kept coming to Jerry Ryan and looking for help because the people were reaching out and they wanted help. We got a lot of buildings cleaned up over the years, and this here organization, to me, have been just fantastic. And one thing we learn is that when you got great volunteers in our communities, it's important we do everything we can to help them as much as we can. And what's taken place here, what you'll see with this here piece of property being sold and then making a couple of dollars on it, it's going to go back into that community. And that's the issue here. What you'll see, the Darrell Flynn Memorial Food Garden was an example of the great work that's being done by that community. So, Madam Chair, I can't say enough about Alistair and Jennifer and the committee. They've really put something powerful together here, and I know Alistair received a couple of calls throughout the country on exactly this idea and how it came to be. So, I think we're setting an example here of other communities that are gonna jump onto this, right? When we just tear down buildings, we know that we're losing tax revenues. Well, what's happening here, and I myself went personally to developers to talk to them about land down there, tell them the good deal that they could get for it, and try to entice them to come and build duplexes, but it didn't work. So when we went to this here group, it was a go. And this is just fantastic news, and I'm asking for council support with this here motion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bruchschwager. Councillor Tracy.
Yes, thanks, Deputy Mayor. Just to add on to Councillor Bruchschwager, I grew up in this area in New Aberdeen. Had a lot of good memories in that particular area. Still have great friends there, and I've known Mr. Moore most of my life. Coached me in hockey. We were neighbors. The group that he's involved with there, they just go above and beyond, and as you just heard in his presentation. So I just want to pass on that. I certainly support this project and this motion, and I hope everybody gets behind it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tracy. Councillor Gordon Mcdonald.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Moore, for a wonderful presentation. When I was going through this in the agenda booklet through this week, I was thinking to myself, what a wonderful opportunity, what a wonderful idea, and the things that you have taken on and were able to accomplish with the plan that you put together, and now what you're doing with and trying to develop it with housing, and to be able to, for the municipality to be able to play a part and have those parcels of land available to you, and the fact that you were able to be ingenious enough to be able to buy the land, sell it to a purchaser for that cost, and be able to reap some of that money back to the organization. I thought that was ingenious, and I think this will go a long way to helping a lot of people in that community, and it's a great idea for other communities. And I'm thinking to myself, it's a great plan, and how can we work this plan over in my district and some of the areas in there? So, I just want to commend you on the fact that the plan and the people that put it together, Councillor Bruchschwager, for being able to support with it, and I hope in the future all your opportunities come to light. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Like Councillor Tracy, the New Aberdeen number 2 area is near and dear to my heart. My mother grew up on 7th Street, as a matter of fact, and I'd like to tip my hat to Al Moore and his committee. You talk about a group dedicated to their community. If I can stray off point here just for a second, I'm about over 50 years removed from Little League Baseball, and Al Moore coached me in Little League. So that's the type of community involvement that Mr. Moore brings to the table, and through the years he's been a stalwart in the community of Glace Bay. As far as the New Aberdeen area is concerned, it wasn't that long ago where it was a very vibrant community, complete with two huge schools, New Aberdeen and St. John's. And through the years, of course, through attrition and the like, it's gone down. And thanks to Al's group, you talk about an appropriate name for a group, the Revitalization group. That's exactly what it is. And thank you very much, Al, for your continued support in the community. It certainly is noticed, and I will definitely be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gillespie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. You know, this project has always been something that I watched and eagerly anticipated their presentations. Not only should Mr. Moore and Ms. Ludlow be thanked for the work that they're doing in the community, they really should be commended for this as well. This really is a very unique opportunity for a community group and a municipality to work together for the betterment of the entire CBRM. And of course, we anticipate hearing from the Glace Bay 3 over here, but it's nice to see Gordon jumping in there as well. And this is going to kill me, but Darren Bruchschwager should be commended as well for the work that he has done, the non-stop commitment that he has made in this community as well. And I just would like to point that out.
Well, thank you, Councillor Gillespie. Councillor Eldon Mcdonald.
Thanks very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. I too will be supporting this, and through you to Sheila. Sheila, thank you for all the work and staff and what you guys do with this organization. You've been before us many times, and hopefully will come before us again many times. It's pretty self-explanatory, the effect that this group has on the community. I'd like to thank Al for coming here tonight and presenting, and wish Jennifer the best of luck on her return from Halifax. And you know, these two people are just diehards in regards to putting their full efforts in to the community. And one of the things I think we can look forward to, Al, is you had some slides there in the end of your presentation, and photo 18 in particular. I think when we see this property turned over to your organization and able to sell it to make a little bit of profit, the profits from those various properties will be able to make that photo and slide 18 come to fruition. And I think once you see developments like that and property transformed like that, you will see a different feel and cultural change in that community. And I look forward to watching that. I was glad to be out there the day that the garden was dedicated to the Flynn family, and I look forward to many days ahead of better developments on the road. So thanks very much for all the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. And motion is carried.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is 4.2, mandatory policy reviews. I would ask Jennifer Campbell to introduce. And once again, just for council knowledge, that the slides are put up on the board and behind you there.
Thank you. I'll apologize now. You're in for about 20 minutes of very dry policy review. I hope everyone had some coffee before the meeting this evening.
Look at the time.
So we are here today because It is a mandatory requirement under the MGA to review certain policies following every regular municipal election. Section 23 specifically, paragraph 7, states that council shall review the municipality's expense and hospitality policies. And the intent of the presentation today is to provide an education on current policies that were adopted by previous councils and address any identified gaps between the legislation or other external regulations and what is in our current policies. So any changes that are identified in your agenda packages are relatively minor. And they do stem from changes in legislation since the policies were last reviewed. So given the volume of information that's going to be presented for the benefit of new council, we're not asking council to approve these policies today, but basically take the presentation today, digest it over the holidays, and formally adopt or re-adopt the policies during the January meeting. As long as the policies are adopted by January 31st, we are in compliance with the Act. So the first one we'll go to is hospitality. So the policy itself starts on page 74 of your agenda. The hospitality policy for Cbrm was developed and adopted 2 years ago in response to legislative amendments to the Municipal Government Act, and that was in response to concerns over the appropriate and inappropriate expensing of alcohol. This was not a specific issue with Cbrm. All municipalities in the province were required to adopt a hospitality policy, and our policy followed the model policy that was developed by the Association of Municipal Administrators of Nova Scotia. The MGA provides the minimum standard under the legislation and states that any hospitality policy is required to establish what is eligible to be expensed, the process for approving such expenses, and when it would be appropriate to incur such an expense. Those items marked with an asterisk are additional regulations under the Financial Reporting and Accounting Manual that's developed by the province, and provides further regulations to ensure accountability and transparency. And it also details the requirements on claim submission support and reporting and disclosure. So the first requirement is to establish eligible expenditures, which is primarily with respect to the serving and expensing of alcohol, when it's appropriate and when it's not. For the most part, it is not appropriate, but there are some situations where it might be acceptable. So sections 10 through 17 of Cbrm's policy addresses this particular requirement and states that it would only be acceptable for reasons of diplomacy, protocol, business development, or promotional advocacy. Their prior approval must be obtained by the CAO. Cbrm must act responsibly in the use of public funds as well as the care and well-being of all persons, must demonstrate good judgment and reasonableness of quantity and cost, and if alcohol is provided, food must also be served. The second requirement to establish an approval process is addressed in sections 7 through 9 of Cbrm's policy. So the signing authority for all hospitality claims is delegated to the CAO, and if the CAO is claiming the expense, then the mayor would sign off. Sections 10 through 13 details the requirement for pre-approval and the accompanying information if costs are estimated to exceed $500. The value and benefit in relation to the cost has to be demonstrated, and if prior approval was for some reason not able to be obtained, perhaps due to vacation or sickness, weren't able to attain prior approval, then an explanation as to why would also have to be provided. The third requirement is to establish scope and applicability, and this is detailed in section 6 of our policy. So only eligible for events that involve hosting individuals from outside of Cbrm, such as foreign dignitaries, representatives from other levels of governments, business, industry, labor, and community leaders regarding official public matters. Sponsoring, hosting conferences, ceremonies, or recognition events are also permitted, and other events as approved by the CAO, her designate, or by council. And lastly, requirement 4 is to comply with the regulations, i.e. FRAM. So obviously you cannot approve your own claim, and as mentioned, pre-authorization is required. Sections 18 through 24 of our policy outline what is required when submitting a claim. So a copy of the pre-approval, names and titles of guests, business objective of the expense, and listing of the costs with supporting detailed receipts. Debit and credit card slips printouts are not acceptable because they can't be vetted against the policy for eligibility. Claims will only be approved if the submission is complete, justified, and consistent with the policy. And finally, sections 25 and 26 notes the reporting and review requirements. Our policy mirrors the requirements defined in the MGA and also forms part of our annual financial information return that is submitted to the province in September. So that is it for the hospitality policy. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to travel?
Nope.
Excellent. Okay, so two policies fall under travel expenses. We have a separate policy for elected officials, and we have a separate policy for staff. Both policies are very similar with certain unique differences, which I'll go through during the presentation. The travel and expense policies were last amended just this past February 2020. The MGA provides the minimum standard under legislation, and again, the policies are to specifically prohibit claims for alcohol by individuals and establishes approval processes and applicability to reportable individuals. The items marked with the asterisks are additional regulations required under the Financial Reporting and Accounting Manual framework and details individual responsibility, establishes restrictions. You cannot submit claims on behalf of others, combine claims, or include ineligible persons in claim submissions. Claim support and the submission process must be defined. You must deal with advances, and you must also address reporting and disclosure requirements. CBRM's current policy is silent on the items in bold on this slide, so an amendment is required to close those gaps. So the policy must address the use of corporate credit cards, prohibit reimbursing expenses for non-employees, and state consequences or the process for fraudulent, irregularity, or misuse of funds. So CBRM has not encountered any concerns over the use of visas or fraud or any misuses of funds. Nonetheless, it is important that our policy be proactive in addressing these issues should they occur. So the amendments are simply in response to recent changes in legislation and FRAM that fill the gap between the regs and our policy. So the first section one, there's just a minor change required. The provincial government changed the number of the section on us, so we just have to update the policy to reflect the correct section and paragraph. Section 2 details the purpose and the intent of the policy, which is to provide reimbursement for reasonable and necessary expenses incurred on official municipal business. Mileage rates are to be reimbursed at the rate set by council. Other expenses reimbursed by either per diem or actual costs. Detailed invoices or receipts are required and subject to review if claiming actual expenditures, as well as the purpose, destination, and date of the trip. Travel is a budgeted expense. Any travel outside of Canada must be pre-approved by the CAO. Each of the provisions of the policy is contingent on budget approval, and council is responsible for managing and limiting travel to what is deemed necessary. The FCM and NSFM conventions are limited to 50% of council membership, with priority given to those that did not attend in the previous year. Non-budgeted travel may be authorized by the mayor in exceptional circumstances or if necessary. Section 3 details overnight travel outside of the municipality while on municipal business. The first part is airfare. So airfare must be booked using the most efficient and direct route. If there is a cost over and above the fare, it has to be justified. So an example of this might be any unexpected cost pertaining to flight cancellations or unexpected layovers due to weather that would not be covered by the airline. That would be an example of a cost that could be justified. Business class is prohibited unless you are incurring continuous air travel in excess of 9 hours. And also, the policy establishes limits on baggage fees and prohibits upgrades unless it's a physical requirement. Flight passes are treated as an advance, a travel advance, and are reportable within 10 days of use. Under lodging or hotels, hotel costs will be reimbursed on completion of the travel. However, CBRM has established direct billing options for most major hotel chains in Nova Scotia. It provides for standard room occupancy only. Upgrades or fees for extra guests would be at personal cost and not reimbursable. Every year, we do a public tender for hotel price agreements in downtown Halifax, and we award based on best price. So unless you're attending a meeting or a convention that is at a specific hotel with an already prearranged blocked room rate, it would be expected that you would use the hotel with our negotiated price agreement in effect. Alternatively, there is a $40 per diem in lieu of hotel accommodation that's available for overnight stays if you're staying with a family member or friend in Halifax instead of staying in a hotel. For meals, they are reimbursed strictly on a per diem basis. All per diems align with the NSFM annual rates and are adjusted every budget year. No receipts are required when claiming per diems, and CAO may approve exceptions allowing actual costs if justifiable, but detailed receipts must be provided. There are stipulations for per diems on departure and arrival dates depending on when you leave or when you return, and you cannot claim a per diem if attending a meal or a conference where meals are provided. So conference itineraries should be attached to your travel claim form to verify that. With respect to local and non-local mileage allowances, the policy provides for reimbursement for those using personal vehicle for travel while on municipal business. The per kilometer rate aligns with the NSFM annual rates and are adjusted every budget year. And you must claim the shorter distance from your place of residence or place of work. And that's more or less for staff. That's not necessarily for elected officials because essentially your personal residence is your place of work. Eligible claims include mileage incurred to attend meetings such as council and committee meetings, board meetings where the councillor was appointed by council, public hearings and meetings, council workshops, training and conventions, meetings with representatives from other levels of government, municipally hosted events like flag raisings or official openings of municipal facilities, or public events where invited specifically as a member of council. You cannot claim mileage for travel associated with political activities associated with elections, meetings with constituents or complainants. Those costs are considered incidental to the discharge of duties and included in council stipend or remuneration. Board meetings where a councillor was not appointed by council, such as a board that you're on because of a personal interest, or travel related to unofficial Cbrm business. However, the CAO may approve other instances that are in fact justifiable. The cost of mileage claimed for non-local travel cannot exceed the cost of round-trip airfare at economy rate, plus taxi and car rental. Carpooling is definitely encouraged if more than one person is attending the same conference, and reimbursement is limited to the mileage for the direct route, so no personal detours. For vehicle rentals, you're encouraged to use a rental vehicle when a more cost effective than a per diem. So like hotels, every year we do a public tender for car rentals and award on the best price. And again, you're encouraged to use that company if you do need to rent a car whenever possible. If attending a conference where activities are off-site from a hotel, a bus, shuttle, or taxi service is not reliable. Carpooling is encouraged again. It's more economical and cost-effective than the combined cost of separate claims, and compact car rates are the standard unless 3 or more people are traveling together. Parking fees, of course, are reimbursable with receipts. Travel advances are discouraged, but they are available if calculated at more than $200. And if you do get a travel advance, you're required to submit a claim within 10 days to reconcile it. And if you did not spend all of your advance, you're expected to pay it back. Ineligible expenses while traveling include lost personal items, medical treatment costs, purchase of personal items, personal services such as valet or laundry services, fines such as parking fines, speeding, or other traffic violations, any costs incurred because of extra guests, and of course, alcohol is prohibited. Section 4, if the bill is combined for travel, the cost is to be split between the individuals, and that's for reporting purposes. So if you're going all at the same conference and you're going out to supper and it all goes on one bill, you don't want that all claimed on your own account because that's all going to get reported to the public under you. So you want to make sure that you're dividing the cost of that meal between the people who actually consumed it. Amendments required under FRAM. Detailed receipts are required both for transparency to verify compliance with the policy, and CRA requires it, because if we don't have the HST cost part of the receipt, we can't claim the ITC, and it costs us money if we're not unable to do that. One of the amendments that were required under FRAM is detailed in bold on this slide and states expenses will not be covered for non-CBRM officials unless approved in advance by the CAO. And for example, that would be if any staff from the Cape Breton Partnership or the Port of Sydney, they should really be charged to their own entity and not by CBRM unless pre-approved by the CAO or unless it's specifically budgeted for. Also added to the policy is eligible travel expenses may be purchased on a corporate credit card so long as the purchases are consistent with this policy and may not be used for cash advances or personal expenses. Section 5 is reporting. So there is, again, a change required to just update the relevant section. Reports for travel, education, training costs are posted to open data quarterly within 90 days of the end of each fiscal quarter. So any travel claims that you submit, we keep track of them and we're required to post them on a public website. In this case, it's the PVSC open data. We have a link to it on our website and the details of your travel are posted for all the world to see. These annual reports also form part of our financial information return and our audited financial statements and are submitted to the province by September 30th of each year. And the last section, section 6, is review requirements. Oh, it's not the last section, sorry. It was a teaser. Requirement for council to readopt policy by January 31st, which is why we are here today. Section 7 is the procedure for claims. So the council assistant will look after booking all your flights, hotels, and car rentals. Advances are approved by myself as the CFO and will not be processed or released any sooner than 5 days before your travel date. So you can apply for a travel advance as early as you like, but you're not going to get it until just before you're ready to leave. Local travel claims should be submitted monthly for reporting purposes. The CAO or designate may approve the mayor's expenses, and there is an amendment proposed to add that all travel expenditures relating to council be authorized by the CAO, CFO, or designate. And this was always the practice, it was just never defined in the policy. Also, claims will only be reimbursed when the following conditions are met. The claim is consistent with the policy, expenses claimed were necessarily incurred in the performance of municipal business, appropriate receipts are provided when required, and support the claim and claim documentation is appropriately filed. Also, in considering an expense claim for payment, the CAO, CFO, or designate may request additional explanations or justifications from the claimant and may refuse to approve any claim or expense they deem as unreasonable or not in compliance with the policy. And these amendments are consistent with the model policy literature as described in the hospitality policy. They would just never form part of our actual policy, so that was just added for clarification. Our policy was silent on issues of fraud, misuse, or misappropriation of municipal funds. So the proposed amendment states that fraudulent irregularity, misuse, or misappropriation of funds may result in disciplinary action. The staff policy also adds up to and including termination of employment. Suspicious activity and potential misuse of funds must be reported to council for determination of further action. Authorization level, section 9 was added just to provide a quick reference for the authorization levels. Section 10 clarifies the timing of updating rates and per diems for international travel. So CBRM rates, as I mentioned, are updated to reflect the NSFM rates every April 1st. And the per diems for US travel are the same as the Canadian rates, but paid in US funds. So the expense policy for staff has been updated to reflect the exact same amendments that were in the council expense policy. The policies are the exact same, except that it does exclude the reimbursement of travel from personal residence to place of work, as that's considered personal travel under CRA legislation. It's applicable mostly to management and confidential staff and only permits meal reimbursement in very, very limited circumstances where employees' attendance directly benefits the municipality. So for example, chamber-sponsored lunch and learn, for example. Other meals reimbursement for unionized staff is actually addressed in collective agreements and doesn't form part of this policy. Authorization levels are noted in the slide above for staff policy. And excluded in the staff policy are those unique to council. So attendance for NSFM and FCM conventions, for example, wouldn't be included in the staff policy. Reportable individuals are defined within the staff policy as the CAO, directors, staff and council employee, and other employees as deemed reportable by council. And that is it for travel. Are there any questions on the travel policies?
Any questions by council for our CFO in regards to travel? Councillor Green.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Through you to the CFO, Jennifer, you indicated that this was going to be reviewed and we'd bring it back in January. Just a quick one in the reporting of expenditures, travel expense for elected officials on page 65 of my agenda, the expense claim locally. It's saying it should be submitted the first business day of the month. When we were in orientation, unless I misheard the Deputy CAO or Director of Technology, that this was, a travel claim was actually going to be put on council's, so council can submit it electronically. Is that still going to be the procedure, that they'll submit electronically? And if so, how, what's the check, what's the balance in check if it's going to be submitted electronically?
Yep, that's a great question. There is a live portal right now, and your council assistant does actually use that portal now. Every councillor has assigned a travel work order, and that captures all of the costs of the claims that you have submitted for any period of time. It accumulates. So when you submit a claim or your council assistant submits on your behalf, that first goes to management for review and approval. And in that portal, in that particular claim, you can attach receipts, you can attach descriptions, you can attach all the information that is needed. All the per diem rates are already preset. John McKinnon, our Deputy CAO, can actually deliver to council a quick snapshot of what that portal looks like. It's really user-friendly, easy to use. As soon as you click submit for the claim, we get an email notification that a claim has been submitted. Management will go in, either myself or John or the CAO, to review it. If there's issues, we'll reject the claim and send it back, requesting further details to be provided, for example. Then you'll submit it, send it back, we'll review it, and we'll hit approve. That accounts payable then gets the notification that it's been approved, and they process the invoice and the accompanying check.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions in regard to the travel portion? No? Okay, so audit committee policy then.
Great, last one. So the requirement to appoint an audit committee is noted in section 44 of the MGA, but the requirement to adopt an audit committee policy and its renewal are actually noted in FRAM. So the audit committee policy starts on page 94 of your agenda. This one, there is one small amendment, which I'll present shortly, and all other sections of the policy are unchanged from what was previously adopted. So the MGA provides the minimum standard under the legislation, and the requirements of the audit committee policy include the obvious ones: a detailed review of financial statements and report on internal controls with the external auditors, review the conduct and adequacy of the audit, any other items arising from the audit as necessary or as deemed to be the duties of the audit committee or as requested by council. So CBRM's audit committee policy was based on the model policy developed and approved by the AMA as a guide. The requirement, again, under regulations, is to meet twice per year at a minimum. The requirements state the audit committee must include one citizen appointee. FRAM requires that an audit committee size has at least 3 people on it. One of those 3 must have a financial designation or relevant financial management experience. And the committee must complete audit committee training, and that committee training is delivered through municipal affairs. Section 1 of CBRM's policy defines the purpose, which is to provide oversight in relation to finance and audit matters delegated to management by council. In addition to the MGA mandatory requirements relating to the audit, the committee also reviews key financial information to be provided to the province or made public, cash and investment management activities, insurance coverage, and the financial conditions indicators. Section 2 just states that the policy applies to all serving members of the audit committee. Section 3, I've quickly added the relevant section of the MGA as a reference. Section 4, the definitions include that of the CAO and CFO, and also defines independent. So independent with respect to citizen appointees means that the citizen is not an employee, a council member, or immediate family member, and they also cannot be an employee of an agency funded in whole or by part by CBRM. So for example, anyone working for the Cape Breton Partnership or Destination Cape Breton or any organization that we provide operating support for would not be eligible to sit on our audit committee because they would not be at arm's length, they would not be independent. The Section 5 defines audit committee composition. So it's the responsibility of council to ensure the audit committee members are independent, financially literate, and have adequate skills to serve as an effective audit committee. Members must know the difference between the oversight function of the committee versus the operating and decision-making function of management. Our audit committee has 7 members. The deputy mayor serves as chair. 2 citizen appointees requiring professional accounting designations will each serve 2-year terms. Those terms rotate in opposite years so that in each year there is an experienced citizen with CBRM Audit Committee training, knowledge, and experience. It is an unpaid position and all members serve on a voluntary basis. We did have a situation occur where a citizen appointee resigned 1 year into their 2-year term. Fortunately, in that situation, the rotation wasn't disrupted and the extension to the second member wasn't required. However, we could in fact have a situation where both positions are vacated at the same time, and we would have to repost both of those, which would disrupt the intended rotation. So I have proposed a modification to the clause that reads, citizen appointments will serve 2-year terms and will rotate off in opposite years to maintain continuity. In the first year, or in any year where both positions are vacated at or prior to term expiry, one of the members at large will sit for a 2-year term with an option to extend for an additional year. Section 5.2 under audit. So review of qualifications, independence, performance, and fees of auditors are done annually. The committee recommends the appointment of our external auditor to council. The appointment of the auditor occurs through an RFP process. Our current auditor appointment expires after this current year's fiscal year end. So as soon as our audit committee meeting to review and approve the audited financial statements occurs in September of 2021, we will have to initiate the process of selecting an auditor for the next 5-year term. The committee also reviews with management and or the auditors the audited financial statements, management letter, and recommend to council. Other matters arising from the audit or requested by council, fraud, illegal, unethical acts or transactions, and the reasonableness of reportable staff and hospitality expenses. Finance and risk management is also something that the next audit committee should take a more proactive approach on now that our feet are under us with respect to audit committee responsibilities. FRAM suggests meeting quarterly. However, the MGA only requires the committee to meet 2 times. Finance and risk management should focus on the other 2 meetings, which include ensuring meaningful financial information regarding current financial results and forecasts are received on a timely basis and that it provides information required for decision making. Review of any financial policies. This ensures that the policies are not only kept up to date, but it also ensures that citizen engagement occurs in finance-related policies, whereas introducing amendments to council excludes them from the process. Insurance coverage. The contract expires in March 31st, 2022, and I would like to arrange to have the current insurance providers to do a presentation on the audit committee once appointed on risks and coverage to the committee. And lastly, banking services agreement, that is expired and we are working on an RFP document. It was on hold pending changes to the procurement policy that was recently approved. And last, administration. Staff support is provided by myself and the CAO. The chair, CAO, and CFO set the meeting agenda. We meet at least 2 times per year, typically to present the audit plan, and then secondly to present the audit findings, but we can actually meet with the auditors at any time deemed appropriate, and our current auditors have in fact offered to meet with council or the audit committee anytime that you folks desire to discuss CBRM's year-end audit. We may meet more often as called on by the chair to discuss other audit committee responsibilities. You can meet in camera with auditors without staff, and you should in fact do so to have a candid discussion with management regarding the audit. And you may also may request expertise from external sources or subject matter experts to assist with committee business. So for example, insurance provider or investment management or anything like that. So that concludes audit committee policy, the last of the policies that have to be reviewed. Are there any questions?
Any questions for our CFO on audit? No, no questions? So perhaps a motion be made that a recommendation be made to the January council meeting to readopt or approve the travel expense policy for elected officials, the travel expense policy for staff, the Cape Breton Regional Municipality Hospitality Policy, and the Audit Committee Policy as presented.
Motion.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Gillespie, second was, sorry, Councillor Parsons. Any discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor, aye? Aye. And against, no? And motion carried. Thank you. So we are next is our planning issue 5.1A, case 1077, land use bylaw map amendment request. I'd ask planner Kristen Knudskoff to introduce the issue. I'm more impressed I got her last name correct. I looked for validation, actually. Thank you.
So this request can be found on page 97 of your agenda package. But tonight I'll just give a brief overview of the application. John and Teresa McNeil are proposing to develop a self-storage facility in the Upper Prince Street area of the Grand Lake Road community. Currently, John and Teresa McNeil own the properties outlined in blue on map 1 of your agenda package, also shown on the screen behind some of you. The applicants are seeking to purchase the subject site, which is outlined in red on your map, which is a portion of PID 15225733 outlined in yellow. If the amendment is approved, the applicants would consolidate the red and blue areas to accommodate the self-storage proposal. So why is an amendment required in this case? The properties in blue as shown on map 2 are currently zoned Arterial Business Corridor, or ABC, while the subject site is zoned Residential Urban A Mobile Home, or RUAM. The ABC zone does permit self-storage facilities as of right, but the RUAM zone does not, and therefore self-storage is not currently permitted on the subject site. The Municipal Planning Strategy, Part 10, Policy 17, does allow council to consider amending the zoning of a property to a zone immediately adjacent. So again, on map 2, you'll see council may consider amending the zoning of the subject site to the ABC zone. In addition, this area is mixed use in nature, so the properties fronting along McGuire Drive and Green Road are predominantly developed with low-density residential dwellings, but the Upper Prince Street area is more mixed use in nature with some commercial and light industrial uses. If council were to approve the amendment, development on this property would be subject to the provisions of the ABC zone, which does include a provision that non-residential developments must be screened from adjacent residential zones. So for those reasons, given that this application is in keeping with the Municipal Planning Strategy Part 10, Policy 17, the area is mixed use in nature and the applicable screening provisions of the ABC zone, it is reasonable that council consider this application. So for that reason, I recommend that council give first reading to the bylaw of the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, amending the land use bylaw, and direct staff to schedule a public hearing at an upcoming meeting of council.
Okay, so for clarity, the motion would be to approve the first reading of the land use bylaw to consider the map amendment request to allow a self-storage facility on portion of PID 15225733, Upper Prince Street area, Grand Lake Road, and to advertise notice of the public hearing at an upcoming meeting of council.
Moved.
Moved by Councillor Parsons, seconded by Councillor Parish.
Either way.
Oh, was it opposite way?
I didn't say nothing.
Councillor Parsons, I don't seem to want to ever acknowledge that you speak. I'm gonna give
You'll
it the
hear me when I
mask.
do
I'll blame
that.
the mask. Okay, so moved by Councillor Parish, seconded by Councillor Parsons. My apologies. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Gillespie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It's always good to see, investment in the commercial property. And this area does definitely qualify for the commercial area in the back. But my concern is the residents on Green Road. Although Green Road is a very busy road because it does really connect the Ashby area to the Grand Lake Road area, shopping and restaurants. My concern would be for those houses that are on Green Road and whether this commercial area that is in back is enough of a buffer, or if there's currently the buffer now. I'm very familiar with the area that's there, and I notice that a lot of the commercial part of it does follow farther down and not the area that is in blue and red. So I would be a little concerned with regards to the residents, but that is only my opinion, and I would defer to the councillor that is in that area.
Thank you, Councillor Gillespie. Councillor Parish.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just for clarity purposes, when I spoke with you the other day about this particular issue, Kristen, to get access to this particular storage facility will be farther up on Upper Prince, so it shouldn't impede any traffic from Green Road, McGuire Drive. Am I correct?
That's correct. The property would be accessed by Upper Prince Street.
So in saying that, it'd be up closer towards the back end where the industrial facility, like when you look in that picture on that map, the last parking lot, I guess we would call it, up there right now is zoned industrial, is it not? That's mechanics and whatnot up in the back?
That would be zoned arterial business corridor, or ABC. Oh, sorry, are you talking about the property adjacent to the subject site?
1159, I guess maybe it would be. It's the number that's on it. I'm just looking at the one that's in our agenda here. You can see where the little dirt
Right.
road is. When you come up Upper Prince there, past Green Road. So I'm assuming that would be the main entry.
The property would have to be accessed directly from Upper Prince Street onto the property. It wouldn't be accessed via the adjacent property.
Yes.
And that property would be zoned arterial business corridor.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Eldon Mcdonald.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor. So just for clarity, in through you to Kristen, the current area that's outlined in blue is already zoned that they could move forward with the project. They're looking to change the red to the blue so that they could incorporate those two properties together. The existing driveway that currently enters that blue square is on the upper end. Is that the driveway that the business would use, or would that driveway be relocated to another portion of that blue property line on Prince Street, Upper Prince? It looks like there's an existing driveway there now.
Right, so the applicant hasn't supplied a detailed site plan at this time, but the driveway would need to be provided in compliance with the requirements of the land use bylaw.
Okay, yeah, I think maybe that's something that should be taken into consideration. I think that's what Councillor Proush was mentioning also, that at least the traffic, the further you can keep away, I think, from the residential homes, if that's a consideration when they're adopting their plans to submit, that would be something that I would hope they would take into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon McDonald.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. My question is, just for my own clarity, is when you indicate that the area has to be screened, does that mean with shrubbery? Does that mean with fenced-in area, that have a buffer zone when you say it's got to be screened? And I also think it's very important that it goes to a public hearing and the residents there would be notified and get a chance to speak on this as well. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, with the motion on the floor, does someone want to call question?
Question.
Okay, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those against, no. Okay, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, under business arising, is the nominating committee. I'll call upon the clerk to introduce.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Earlier today, the nominating committee met and dealt with a number of issues with respect to appointments to internal, external committees by members of council as well as citizens, and staff appointments to the REN's Liaison Oversight Committee and the Nova Scotia Affordable Housing Commission. That's a newly formed commission by the province. The recommendations from the nominating committee are on your desk. This meeting was just held at 3:30 this afternoon, and I would note that there's one change to the motions. There's 3 pages of motions there, actually 4 pages. On the first page, the Charter Ad Hoc Committee, we do have to insert our Deputy Mayor, Earlene. That was just a typo oversight that was missed, so all of the recommendations from the nominating committee are listed on those motions. If the council agrees with those recommendations, they can be, I would suggest approving the internal, the council appointments as one motion. You could include them all in one motion. However, the last 2 on the last page, the REN Liaison Oversight Committee and the Nova Scotia Affordable Housing, be dealt with separately. There were a number of elections and votes that were held this afternoon as well, because there were more council requests to be members of the committee than there were vacant seats. So I will leave it at that, and maybe the Deputy Mayor can run through the recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So if it's agreed by council, perhaps I'll just read through the council positions, and we can open it up then for discussion and see if we want to approve them as a whole or individually, if that works with council.
Agreed.
Okay. Okay, so Petapac. It was moved by Councillor Gillespie, I'm reading a little further, but that the nominating committee recommend to council to appoint Councillor Cyril Mcdonald and Councillor Steve Parsons to Petapac for a 2-year term. And for those councillors that may not be aware, it was previously discussed with this committee to offer it out to 2 members as opposed to just the 1 that was on the council sheet. The Heritage, the nominating committee, for the record, should I be reading out who first and second, or is that irrelevant?
You can read it if you like, but that's not relevant to the motion because,
Okay.
yeah, it was
Okay.
a recommendation from the committee.
Perfect, thank you. The nominating committee recommended in regards to Heritage, Councillor Eldon McDonald, Councillor Parish, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Tracy, and Councillor O'Quinn to the Heritage Advisory Committee for a 2-year term. Charter Ad Hoc, again with the amendment, the nominating committee recommended to council to appoint Councillor Earlene McMullen, Councillor Cyril McDonald, Councillor Gillespie, Councillor Edwards, Councillor O'Quinn, and Councillor Green. And the CBRM Charter Ad Hoc Committee is a 2-year term. Fences and Arbitration, the nominating committee recommended to council to appoint Councillor Cyril McDonald, and Deputy Mayor McMullen as the alternate to the CBRM Fences and Arbitration Committee for a 2-year term. Ren Liaison and Oversight. This is in regards to council representation. Deputy Mayor forgot my own name. As I read it, so that's telling you. Deputy Mayor McMullen and Councillor Parsons, and that's to serve on the Ren Liaison for a 2-year term. Police Commission, the nominating committee recommended to council to appoint Councillor Gillespie, Councillor Eldon McDonald, and Councillor Edwards. The Board of Police Commissioners is a 2-year term. Fire and Emergency Services, the nominating committee recommended to council to appoint Councillor Gordon McDonald, Councillor Parish, Councillor Brookschwager, and Councillor Green to serve with Deputy Mayor on the Fire and Emergency Services for a 2-year term. The Library Board, the committee recommends to council to appoint Councillor O'Quinn, Councillor Eldon McDonald, and Councillor Parish for a 2-year term. Nova Scotia Solid Waste Resource Management Regional Chairs Committee. The nominating committee recommends to council to appoint Councillor Cyril McDonald for a 2-year term. CBRM Youth Council Advisory Committee. It's recommended by the nominating committee to council to appoint Councillor Ken Tracy and Councillor Darren O'Quinn for a 1-year term. The Audit Committee. The nominating committee recommends to council to appoint Councillor Cyril McDonald, Councillor Parsons, Councillor Green, and Councillor Parish to serve with the Deputy Mayor on the Audit Committee for a 2-year term. So that would summarize all of the council positions.
I would so move those, Deputy Mayor, as a block form for council to accept.
Second?
Okay, I'm sorry I missed the seconder. Of course I missed the seconder. Every time I don't hear it, I'm just going to assume it's Councillor Parsons. So that was moved by Councillor Green and seconded by Councillor Parsons to accept the recommendation of the nominating committee. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Question?
Question's been called. Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. Question's been called. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Against, no. And motion's carried. So that brings us to our Regional Enterprise Network and Liaison Oversight Committee for the CBRM staff appointments. So did you want to, you didn't touch on these, did you? No.
I just mentioned that they would require separate motions because they're not same as the rest of the issues. Yeah.
Okay. So the nominating committee, the motion would be that the nominating committee recommends that Ken LeBlanc, Community Development Coordinator, be appointed as one of the CBRM staff representatives on the Liaison and Oversight Committee for the REN, and that Jennifer Campbell, Chief Financial Officer, be reappointed as the second CBRM staff representative on the LOC.
So moved.
Second?
So moved by Councillor Brookschwager and seconded by Councillor Tracy.
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Oh, was it you again?
Of course it was.
Of course it was.
You need a different mask, Councillor Parsons. I'm going to blame it on the mask.
Question?
Question's been called. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
All those against, no. Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay. Now I'm forgetting where we are. Okay, now we move on to the Nova Scotia Affordable Housing Commission. This again will require separate. The nominating committee recommends to council that Marie Walsh, Chief Administrative Officer, be appointed as the new Nova Scotia Affordable Housing Commission representative.
So moved. Second?
Moved by Councillor Gillespie, seconded by Councillor Eldon McDonald. Any discussion on the motion?
Question.
Questions called. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Against, no. Motion's carried. Okay. That was much quicker than the nomination meeting.
Was Eldon's fault.
Okay, so we move on now on the agenda as the councillor agenda request item 7.1 and Councillor Glenn Parish to introduce.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Motion that council directs staff to prepare an issue paper on the proposed study regarding the possibility of establishing a new recreational facility within the CBRM with 2 courts for court sports such as basketball, volleyball, and for senior activities, and that the study include costing and possible funding sources.
I'll second.
So it's moved by Councillor Parish and seconded by Councillor Cyril Mcdonald that staff be directed to prepare an issue paper on a proposed study regarding the possibility of establishing a new recreation facility within the CBRM with 2 courts for court sports such as basketball, volleyball, and for seniors activities, and that the study include costing and possible funding sources.
Yes.
Is there discussion on the motion? Councillor Parish.
Oh, perfect, thank you. I just wanted to bring this forth because sports, as we know, is pretty important to youth, to seniors, and to middle-aged men like ourselves. Brooks Wager, I'll throw you in that equation. We all know that these court sports rely heavily on the school gymnasiums, and when this pandemic hit us, it was evidently and abundantly clear that we rely heavily on these schools for these particular programs. Physical activity in sport is vital to the mental health and for the well-being of us all. And I hope that we can all work on this issue in our CBRM and come up with a viable option to go along with seniors programs. We worry about retention with the residents of our community, and I feel that if we can create a court sport facility within the municipality, it will help us when we're trying to draw in future generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parish. Councillor Gillespie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I would also thank Councillor Parish for bringing this forward. We've had discussions about this, not only in council but in committee meetings, and how important it is to have a sportsplex within the city limits and outlying areas here. I would hope one thing that I noticed on here, but it does say 2 courts. If the study comes back and saying that there should be 3 or 4, we're going to accept that type of information. Is that correct?
I will ask Councillor Parish.
I certainly hope so. I hope we can throw a pool in there too.
Terrific. Okay, thank you.
And for the record, the pool is not part of the motion.
No.
Councillor Cyril Mcdonald.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So in my previous role with Sport Nova Scotia, I can tell you there is a huge demand and a huge need in the CBRM for this type of facility. We rely heavily on our schools and our school gymnasiums, and if there's one thing that I saw in my role was that when the schools shut down, many of our young athletes had nowhere to play, nowhere to compete, nowhere to practice. When Glenn speaks, or Councillor Parish, sorry, speaks to mental health, physical activity and mental health go hand in hand. And when young people are active, when seniors are active, I am not a middle-aged man, thank you. When young people are active, it does improve so many things in our community, and I think this is very much needed, and I look forward to seeing this to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mcdonald. And for the record, I'm not a middle-aged man either. And we will go to Councillor Gordon McDonald.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I think it's a great idea, and I like the idea, and I agree with both of the previous speakers about how recreation will help with with mental health and be able to get out and do activities. I'd like to see it extended a little beyond and see tennis courts in there as well. And I don't think why we restrict ourselves to just the basketball and volleyball, and I see the concept of it. So I'll support this recommendation, but at some point I think it could be looked at as to have tennis courts included in this kind of a facility and in the study. So it'd be a great idea as well. So thanks.
Chair.
Councillor Bruchschweiger.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I also support the idea of getting the study done to see exactly where we stand, but I have to say that, like, when I hear the idea of the way and what's going on with our schools and the fact that there's basically no access to them anymore, and we got some beautiful gymnasiums throughout the CBRM, and you know, I just feel that we have to reach out and talk to the Department of Education and try to find some partnerships, you know, that we can, because let's face it, if we got children if this thing ended up in Sydney and we got kids out in Portmoreland or Northside somewhere, a lot of them aren't able to get there. But their local schools, they can. So there's, you know, the gymnasiums are in those facilities and it's just closed down at 3 o'clock. So, you know, some evening stuff that could take place in these facilities. And I know we got a couple of school board members here that might be able to enlighten us on why it has to be locked up solid, you know, and I just, with no community access, just doesn't seem fair to me. And, you know, for a municipality that really struggles financially, it's difficult for us to put these facilities everywhere, but they are needed, as pointed out. It's something that's needed in CBRM, so I really think we should, along with the study, reach out to governments and the Department of Education on this particular issue to see what, if anything, can be done to help us in each divisions to open up a few of these facilities so our children can take advantage of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bruchschwager. Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. A couple of points. Number one, I just need some clarity as it relates to the possibility of establishing a new recreation facility in CBRM. If there were other potential spots within CBRM, would it be the onus on the group to bring forward, knowing that this will be made public as of tonight, and or a part of the study? Would the study include looking at current facilities that we may or may not have that are dispersed in a centralized area that could be made part of the study as well? That was my first point. And number two, reflecting back on my education days on the board, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Green, when school facilities always came up for topic of conversation, it was always surrounding a liability issue. That's the first thing that we as a school board were told. Because of liability after hours, it wasn't a part of the regular school day. And it just seemed that if it's a liability issue, because it was a cost, maybe that's something that we could talk to the Regional Education Center about. If it's a cost issue versus a janitor issue of cleaning a facility after the activity was done, then I think that warrants certainly that discussion with the superintendent. And certainly if we have these facilities, why incur costs to go out and rebuild what we already have? So I think those discussions will be paramount as part of the study, because, you know, we're limited in dollars, and if we have facilities, like we say, great facilities with nice gyms, and why reinvent the wheel if we already have it? I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. CAO, in regards to this request, I assume these conversations could be part of the report. Would that have to be mentioned in the motion? Is this something staff possibly is already looking into? I'm not.
We've already, I guess, discussed the issue and have discussed having an addition to Center 200, and it was an approved project that we are moving forward with. We don't have any funding designated currently, but I would suggest that if we do have a study, it would have to be specific to somewhere where we would pick, because the study would be all over the place if we were selecting several, unless it was a study specifically to pick a location. Once you pick a location, then you can do a study on what the cost would be and to look at funding opportunities, because the cost will be very different if it's a standalone, if it's attached to Center 200, if it's attached to one of our other facilities. The cost will be very different, so we'd have to be specific on what we would want that study to look at. But in the particular issue paper that Councillor Parish is requesting, I think we discussed some of those items. I do agree with Councillor Parsons. It's disappointing that we can't use the schools. I don't think there is any obstacles concerning insurance or otherwise that we could not overcome working together. So I definitely think we should also explore that option.
So for clarity, Marie, the current motion that's put forward, can this continue without having a site preferred first, or should there possibly be consideration of an amendment to find a site first?
I believe. I got to look at it. I thought it was referring to Center 200, but
Well,
I guess.
Councillor Parish? For
You and I
clarity?
thank you, Deputy Mayor. You and I had spoken about it, Marie, about possibility of it being here, and in all honesty, I think it's the best option. To go along with that, I have two other points. We talked about the schools. Well, the provincial government gave $5.5 million to help alleviate the stress so that through this COVID pandemic that's going on, children could get back in the schools so they could hire additional staff for cleaning and things like that. So that is something that they've looked at. Devil's advocate to that, if they're willing to throw a $5.5 million, I think we could look at this study, and that they would be also willing to give us a court facility, seeing as we're the second biggest municipality and we don't have anything. Since the bicentennial is no longer an option, we should almost be embarrassed to not have something, right? So I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for the clarity. Councillor O'Quinn.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to go on record and support this initiative as well. I've coached youth basketball for more than 25 years. I know there's a need for a building of this nature. And just last winter alone, coaching with BCB, we were using the Bicentennial Gym. The parents were in there with winter jackets on, coaches had winter jackets on. So I think like a new state-of-the-art building would be welcomed by everyone, and I think it would be well utilized by everyone within the Cbrm. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Quinn. Councillor well, that would be his second. So you'd still be on your first, Councillor Eldon Mcdonald.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor. Just in light of the conversation of Councillor Brookswagger's comments and the need for schools, I think we should entertain those types of discussions to go forward. But there's definitely a need. Basketball, Cape Breton has been playing out of what was a hockey rink, not suitable at all. Agree with Councillor Prush's comments. We should almost be embarrassed to think of the facilities that our youth are playing out of, but that's the best we have to offer them, and we've done our best with that facility. And we need to have better, and we need to do better, and our senior levels of government need to recognize that with us. But in saying that, a lot of, and I can be correct if I'm wrong, but a lot of this stuff is organized sports, but we also have young children that don't play organized sports. But they still want to be active and they still want to get out. Those are the opportunities, I think, with the school board, that we can have those discussions where local communities will have a place to go and just have activity where kids are out and away from the computer screens and away from technology and being kids. So I think there's both discussions need to happen, but I think as referenced here with, through you, Mr. or Mrs. Mayor, or Deputy Mayor, to CEO Marie Walsh's comments, I definitely think there's some opportunity there for some further discussions in regards to Center 200, and I look forward to those taking place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I certainly agree that there is a need for the activity in the community, but going on with on the same line with Councillor Brookswagger and others here, I wonder if there's ever been any discussion at all with the university as far as facilities available there.
Yeah, well, am I allowed to speak? I've already spoken. But I can speak all night if you want.
Councillor Parish, if you have an answer to Councillor Edwards' question, then please.
Perfect. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Initially, yes, there were conversations with CBU, and there were talks that we could get in there, but that has since fallen through because they have different COVID protocol now, so they are using the old rink out there for that reason. They're using their gymnasium as storage, so that option was on the table, but now isn't. So that's no longer an option.
And Councillor Edwards, you still have time on your first five, so go ahead.
Thank you. So the possibility of a site or the facility being available at the university could materialize in the advent of or when COVID is hopefully over. The possibility exists for that? And the facility is there?
I don't know, perhaps Marie, could you comment to that?
I would ask Councillor Parish. I think he's been in contact with them.
Well, possibly, but the purpose of bringing this issue paper was I'll actually steal a line from Mr. Dingwall. We're trying to do something now so that when stuff does get back to normal, the proverbial ball is already rolling. So to sit back and play the hurry up and wait game on this one, I just think we're like a dog chasing our tail. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards, you still have time.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps, okay, prior to Councillor Bruchschwager, perhaps as everyone is referring to reaching out to the schools, to CBU, perhaps once this motion is off the floor, we could put a motion forward that staff reach out to find out what is available or possible, or what means we could, obviously someone's gonna have to word it much better than I just did. But in the meantime, Councillor Bruchschwager.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and that's exactly where I was going. See that we could get staff to set up meetings with the responsible parties at the school, at the administration office, and with CBU, and any other possibilities that we can possibly partner up to help with some of these needs we have in our communities. It makes no sense, I'll say it again, that these buildings are closed at 3 o'clock when they could be a great hub for area children to go and get a lot of recreation in, a lot of activity. And I just think it's something, there's parents in every community that are willing to help out, that will go to chaperone, to coach, to do. They're all willing to help. All we need is the places to go, and I think we should search that out. So I agree with you, Madam Chair. It should be a separate motion maybe after this one is finished, and I'll make that motion when at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, and my apologies, I went out of line there. So we're going for the first 5 to Councillor Green.
That's okay, Madam Deputy Mayor. Actually, not to reiterate any comments that were already made, but that was going to be my suggestion. This, and I refer to the CAO, this motion it's nice, and I do understand where the councillor is going with it. But unfortunately, you know, when you're going out with studies, you definitely should specify where you're looking. I think that's the first thing you need to do. As Councillor Bruchschwager had mentioned, you know, there is, other than Sydney, there is other outlying communities that could really benefit from this type of facility. But I think the first thing we need to do is identify where, if we are going to pursue this, where we want to pursue it. It changes a lot of the dynamics when you're seeking funding and partnerships. So I think that that's very important. This motion, while I do understand where the councillor is going with it in terms of the facility, needing the facility, I think it would be very, you know, it would be unwise of us to send this out the way it looks now, because we wouldn't be giving staff clear direction as to what we are looking for, because this motion really doesn't tell me what we're looking for other than a facility. It could be anywhere, and I think that's very important we identify that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on to Councillor Gillespie on your second.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Very disappointed to hear that the CBU's Canada Games Complex is no longer available. We actually thought that that was already done, so that's kind of disappointing to hear. When it comes to the school part of it, individuals that live in these outlying areas should be on the phones to their MLAs. The Department of Education is a provincial organization, and that is where the MLAs come in. So if you've had this pulled from you and you're in those outlying communities, I think it's important to contact your MLA and let them know how you feel about this. The province of Nova Scotia holds our feet to the fire when we don't do what we're supposed to do. We should definitely hold their feet to the fire when they don't as well. I asked CAO Marie Walsh, is there money set aside for a study like this? Or is there funding opportunities with the different levels of government to fund this study?
No, we have no money set aside, but we'd certainly go after funding to, anytime there's a study like this, we would certainly seek out funding to help us pay for the study.
Okay. And I would, say to council, just on my own opinion here, that there are outlying areas, of course, that would benefit from an infrastructure like this. But when we're building something like this as a sportsplex, we also have to consider that there is a possibility that individuals will be coming in for conferences to use it and maybe coming in for sports events. And the closer we are to our hotel business is also of benefit.
Thank you, Councillor Gillespie. Councillor Eldon Mcdonald on your second.
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor, but if I can defer, I think Marie wanted to speak, I think, so I'll let Marie speak and then I'll go. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I just wanted to touch on something that Councillor Gillespie said. We have to keep in mind that if we are building such a facility, it is much more economical and makes more sense that it is part of another facility, because we would have to staff it. It would be extremely expensive to have a standalone facility, and any discussions we've had to date were of having that facility attached to one of our existing facilities so we could get economies of scale and staff it with the current staff that we have.
Thank you. Councillor Eldon Mcdonald.
Thanks very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just in light of that, if I could, for some clarity, if I would be looking to move an amendment to the motion and to have the amendment read that it would be the report look into the addition onto Center 200. That would be the location, that would be the preferred location. There may be others, but that would be a preferred location. And I would move that as a motion.
So regarding the possibility of establishing an addition to Center 200.
Yes, that if we were to build a facility, that it be looked at in the report, that it would be part of the Center 200 building. And if I could speak after we get the motion down.
Okay, you're making this very difficult for me on my first chairing meeting. So for clarity, when we have an amendment, we go to the amendment. Okay, so everything, okay. Okay, would you like to speak on the amendment?
Well, I'm moving it, so we need a
Oh, sorry.
if there's a
second.
Okay, so the amendment of, just for clarity, moved by Councillor Eldon Mcdonald, seconded by Councillor Parish, that staff be directed to prepare an issue paper on a proposed study regarding the possibility of establishing a recreation facility in CBRM with 2 courts in addition to the Center 200 as an addition to the Center 200 facility, and that the study include costing and possible funding sources. Would that be?
Yes.
Okay. So you wanted to speak to the motion, Councillor McDonald?
Yes, if I could. And the reason I specifically am saying Center 200 and to bring to light some discussions that we had several years ago when we done a refit of this building for energy savings and consumption of heat and the running of this facility. There's excess energy being created. I wish Paul McDonald was here to be able to speak to it, but he's not. But I know a few years back there was excess energy in this facility that we could actually sell. And we were in negotiations with the casino that there was enough energy being produced, excess of what we needed for this facility, that would actually heat the casino. And we would actually generate revenue from it. So I'm thinking if that excess energy is still available, that it could be an expansion, that excess energy could be then directed into heating that build if it was to happen, depending on how the report would come out. So I think there's some savings already by having it connected to this facility. But again, other things could be looked at in the study, but I think that needs to be taken into consideration. And maybe at a future meeting, Paul McDonald may be able to update us on, how much that excess is still there or isn't there. But I know there was quite a bit when it was originally put in place. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Eldon McDonald. Councillor Bruckschwager, and just before you begin, Councillor, I just wanted to let everyone know, because this is the first time we're dealing with an amendment on the floor. If you had already spoken, your 5 and your 2, because it's a new motion, they renew. So you're able to comment on your first 5 and your second on the amendment on the floor. Councillor Bruckschwager.
So on the amendment, and I understand where Councillor McDonald is coming from, and there has been much discussion about this possibility of the piece on the center. We had some early discussions about it. I guess I'm a little bit what I'm going to watch for, and I think is important to note that all this stuff comes down to budget and budget negotiations. And at that time, what we're into is with limited dollars, we try to find balances and divisions to help everything that we can. And I know there's a couple of things in the queue for Central at this point as well. So I think that's important to point out because that is the process. So although we are actually approving something, I think it's really in principle. It's not to actually rubber stamp the project. It's going out on a hunt to see what's available and the costs and what we can do. As far as any costs ourselves, Marie, if you've got no money left in your budget for studies, I don't know if you do or you don't. You said you would look around to see if you could get some funding to help with that study?
I guess just to be clear, the issue paper is to come back with costs of a study. It's not to go out and do a study. It's to come back with the logistics around doing a study,
Okay.
whether or not we can get funding from it and where it would.
Very good. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Buchschweiger. Is there any, Councillor Parish?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just getting back to the issue paper, it was the whole purpose of trying to bring this to council was to get the ball rolling, I guess, no pun intended. But we need something. We have lots of projects in the works. We're working on promoting that Sydney is our hub. Center 200 is part of our hub. It only makes sense. Thank you, Eldon, for mentioning that it be here. I know we have other projects in the works, but we're at a good place here in the CBRM for the next 10 years, and I do think that this is something that there's a lot of people out there, whether it's Glace Bay, Waterford, Meadow, wherever, we need something for everybody. And it could be, we've been talking about a library forever. We still don't have our library. So like, let's get this going. Maybe our next term, if we're all lucky enough to get back in here, we're talking about putting at Center 200. Hopefully it happens sooner than that, but you know, we got to start somewhere. So thank you.
Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to make the point that we're not building facilities because of COVID. COVID is something that we're living and surviving in, and we'll get through it. Because there is a need for recreational facility of this sort, and I will support that. I guess I'm disappointed in terms of hearing response from CBU because it's only last week that we as council supported CBU in terms of building or going after funding for a research facility to the tune of $100 million. So it's just disheartening that I hear that CBU is not coming back supporting what we like to do in terms of what we're facing with COVID. If COVID ends with vaccines in the spring, I would hope to think that CBU would certainly open their doors for recreational sports in lieu of getting this built, which will take a couple of years if funding is available. So I'm a little bit disheartened to hear that, and I would hope that maybe the Deputy Mayor, through the Mayor, could certainly make our thoughts known to CBU. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any further discussion on Councillor Edwards?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The only comment that I could add is, again, there's no question that the facility is in need, and but there's lots of other places in CBRM where there are current facilities not being used. I'm wondering if we should be restricting the motion to the Center 200 area, or we can just leave it at the much to the original request that we're looking for an issue paper for the two-court facility and the like, but then to add in that it's at the Center 200 location or bust. I don't know if that's serving this council at this time. I can think of other buildings in the immediate area where perhaps this could be done now. So I just wanted to make that known as well to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Is there any other discussion on the amendment, the motion?
On my second.
Councillor Bruckschwager, on your second.
On my second for the amendment, just on the CBU comments, as I understand it, we were renting the Canada Games complex as a municipality because the Bayplex was down and out, okay? So we used that facility, and the municipality just gave that up because the New Miners Forum opened again. Is that correct, Marie?
We weren't renting it, we were paying for all the operating costs. We were able to use it and paid for all the costs.
But we stopped doing that. We said it was no longer needed.
That's
It was
correct.
us that walked away out there because the Miners Forum opened again. So I just want to make sure that the conversation is had with CBU, with Mr. Dingwall, on what partnerships might be able to be started again, if that's a possibility, because it costs us a lot of money to be out there for those few years. I know that for a fact. And it was our decision, through Bill Murphy and council, that we decided it was no longer needed. So I want to be clear. I just want to be sure what we're doing with CBU tonight, because it
I
was
believe
us
that-
that walked away.
Yes, I believe the discussions about the basketball were not with CBRM and CBU, it was with Basketball Cape Breton and CBU. So we were not involved in that discussion.
I see. Okay.
Councillor Eldon McDonald, on your second.
Thanks very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just, I guess, a couple of more comments that come to my mind. And this may be something to look into. I don't know what the situation is now prior to a number of years back, but I know right now we have Basketball Cape Breton that was in the Bicentennial, and we had the gymnastics organization also in the Bicentennial. They were located at CBU a few years back, and my understanding is that they were asked to vacate those premises, that they needed the space, I guess, for whatever reasons, I'm not sure, but I know they did have to leave the university. So I don't know if something's changed that they may be able to accommodate them or the Basketball Cape Breton folks. So that might be something to look into there, why they originally had to leave, and is there an option there for them to be able to go back? The other thing is just in relation to the location. And I did say that, there could be other options, and this would be the preferred location. And I think with it being the preferred location, would say that it's not the only location necessarily. If there's something else that comes out in the report that there may be another location, I would hope that the staff that are doing this report to bring it back to us would identify there could be another location. But the way I'd word it was preferred location. So I'm not, closed to looking at other options that may be available that staff may identify for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eldon McDonald. Councillor Gordon McDonald, on your first.
Yeah, so on the amendment, thank you, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor. I too kind of wouldn't want to be restricted to the Center 200, and I initially was looking at the motion to, supporting it, because I thought the study was about looking within the CBRM to see where that facility would be. I don't know if I fully agree with the statement that Sydney is the hub. I mean, we're supposed to be a CBRM community of communities, and we're supposed to be, kind of equal. And I understand that the city is, where all the action and activity goes on, but we got to look beyond the city in this area. So I think on the motion, I don't know if I'll be able to support it if it's directly connected to the Center 200, because we have lots of other facilities around the CBRM that, could utilize this kind of a facility. So, anyway, I'm just wondering if the motion is to have it connected to Center 200, or is the motion to be able to look in the CBRM and to look at a facility within that body, or are we connecting it to a specific spot? Thanks.
Councillor Gordon McDonald, for clarity, what's currently on the floor is an amendment to the original motion that is stating that Center 200 is the preferred location. This is not the motion that would be approved or denied with the vote of council. This will, if the amendment is approved by majority, then that will turn into the motion. If the amendment is declined by majority, then we go back to the original motion as is. Does that answer your question?
It does, thanks.
And for clarity from the clerk, would I be correct? Or I want to make sure I didn't misspeak.
Yes, it's the amendment you're going to vote on first, which is that Center 200 be the preferred location. And then if that's approved, then you go back to the original motion to have the study with the costing with Center 200 as the preferred. If the amendment doesn't pass, then you go back to the original motion, which is stated in Councillor Prush's request.
Councillor Cyril McDonald.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a little bit of clarity. What does preferred mean? So if we say preferred location, does that mean this will only look at Center 200 as the location? Or does preferred mean this will be our preferred choice, but we'll also look at other options? I'm just not sure now what preferred means.
I will turn that back over to the person who made the motion of amendment. So Councillor Eldon McDonald for clarity.
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor. Yeah, so from my perspective of moving that as an amendment, preferred to me would be the preferred location, but not the only location. No one knows our buildings and our facilities better than our staff. Bill Murphy being one of those individuals, Paul McDonald being the individual with this particular building. I would rely on our staff that know our facilities to say Center 200 is mentioned as the preferred location, but we also have this other location that could be just as good, and that option should be brought forward at least as an option for council to consider. But again, it's preferred, but staff know our buildings better than council, if I can say that. But I would rely on the professional folks here that do this on a daily basis to be able to bring us back good recommendations, recognizing again the reason I said preferred and I mentioned it earlier was there is opportunities I hear that I see here that could make this a location with heating and operational costs that would be much more inclined to be more sustainable than if you're building a standalone freestanding building, but there may be other options out there.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that preferred meant that we weren't locking ourselves into something before, my district is quite large and vast, and I know it doesn't make sense to put this facility in Grand Narrows, but if there's a facility that makes more sense in Grand Narrows, then let's put it there. So I wanted to make sure that, that preferred wasn't locking us into something, so thank you.
Thank you, and we will move on to Councillor Parsons on your second go.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll go back to my original specific, a new recreation facility in Cbrm. I had the opportunity to attend a meeting with a potential facility that's owned by Cbrm that could potentially house something of this nature. So that was the reasoning behind my question in terms of specifically. But it preferred means that we're going to look at other venues that may come to light or should come to light based on conversations with staff. Then I think we should take that opportunity. And yes, I agree with you, Mr. Bruce. Sydney's very important downtown, but there's other areas of populated areas that may have an idea that they would like to pursue as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any further discussion on the motion of amendment?
Question?
Okay, so question's been called. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those against, no? Okay, the motion of the amendment has been passed. So now that brings us back to the original motion, which has now changed to that of the motion that we just amended. So for clarity, this puts us back on the floor. And I'm going to read it again just to make sure that the wording is correct. So moved the original motion. So is it the amendment that comes back?
You're back to the original motion, and you'll add the amendment. So it'll be main motion as amended.
Okay, so the main motion was that staff be directed to prepare an issue paper on a proposed study regarding the possibility of establishing a recreation facility in Cbrm with 2 courts as a preferred location, an addition to Center 200.
No, that's, you're going back to the amended motion. Sorry, Madam Deputy Mayor. We're doing the original motion, and Center 200 isn't mentioned in the original motion. So you're going to do the original motion because the amendment just passed. We're not discussing the amendment now. We're doing the original motion. Sorry about that, just for clarity.
I'm going to have to get clarity from Dimitri because I'm under the impression that when we amended the motion, that now becomes the motion.
Yeah, so the motion is amended. As amended. So it's the main motion.
The amendment passed.
Mhm.
Right, so now you have the main motion as amended, right? So it is what you're saying, right?
Okay, so my wording,
The main motion
okay.
as amended.
And you're, okay, so for clarity, it would be the main motion as amended. And your first would be the amended, like, would it be Councillor Eldon Mcdonald? Or would it be back to the original where it was Councillor Parish? On the first and seconder? The original? Oh, if Bernie White could be here now. Okay, so back to the motion as amended. So it was moved by Councillor Parish and seconded, who was our seconder?
No, Madam Deputy Mayor, sorry, we're not doing the amended motion. We're doing the original motion. The amended motion has already passed. There's no more debate on the amended motion. What you're doing is the original motion. You can't change the intent of the original motion because it's already moved and seconded. Eldon moved an amendment to the original motion. So what you're going to do now is the original motion, and the suggestion for council would be to turn this motion down because the amended motion will override this one.
Right, exactly.
Madam Clerk, could you clarify the process?
Dimitri, how you doing?
Madam Mayor?
You passed an amendment, right? There was a main motion on the floor, there was an amendment proposed, the amendment passed. So what you have now, you're back to the main motion, but it's as amended, because if you don't consider the amendment, then the main motion, it would just be the main motion as unamended, right? So it's the main motion now, you're voting on the motion as amended.
So, just for a point of clarification, Madam Mayor, if I can, with me being the mover of the amendment that was carried. So if I could throw you to Dimitri. So Dimitri, would it be fair to say that we could look at the original motion as was presented in the issue paper here on the agenda request form from Councillor Prush, and we would take that original motion as it's written, and at the end of that say as amended, and then the amendment is included in that so that people know what the amendment is. So you would read the main motion as amended, and then that amendment would actually be documented.
I think what you're trying to get to is the same. I think what Councillor Green is trying to get to is the same as what you're trying to get to. You have a main motion, you amended it, right? So that's what you're trying to pass, the main motion as amended. So, I mean, however you get there is fine, but like that's what you're looking at now. You want, as my understanding, is to vote on a motion to do an issue paper for a study.
Exactly.
Right, for the recreational course, with a preferred Center 200, but looking at other aspects as well, right?
Yes, I would agree. That's why I would see that you're agreeing to vote on the main motion here, as was originally presented, as amended from the amendment that I have put forward.
Since you passed the amendment, that's what you're trying to do, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's done. It's done.
Yeah. No, we still have to actually vote on the new motion as amended. Yeah. No, we voted on the amendment, which brought it back to the main motion. Clear as mud. Okay, so, and I do understand, because if it does come back to the motion as it was, there's a possibility that the original motion could be approved when we have the amended motion on the floor, which doesn't make any sense. So, again, we go back to the motion as amended. And it was, will I read out the original motion in the first and seconder and then as amended with that for the record? Or do I read out the motion as amended, or does it matter?
Doesn't matter, wherever way you get there is fine.
Okay. So the motion as amended was moved by Councillor Eldon Mcdonald and seconded by Councillor Parish, that staff be directed to prepare the issue paper on a proposed study regarding the possibility of establishing a recreation facility in CBRM with 2 courts as a preferable location as an addition to Center 200, and that the study include costing and possible funding courses. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we're back to the main motion. Therefore, we go back to that order. Is there any discussion, any further discussion on the motion as amended?
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those against, no. Okay, because we have a nay, we are going to go person to person. And there we go. Okay, so I'll begin with myself. Aye. Councillor Gordon McDonald.
Aye.
Councillor Cyril McDonald.
Aye.
Councillor Gillespie.
Aye.
Councillor Eldon McDonald.
Aye.
Councillor Perouche.
Aye.
Councillor Parsons.
Aye.
Councillor Edwards.
Aye.
Councillor Tracy.
Aye.
Councillor Bruckschweiger.
Aye.
Councillor O'Quinn.
Aye.
And Councillor Green.
Nay.
Motion is passed. Now I am going to refer to Councillor Bruckschweiger in regard to a motion that came as a result of, a possible motion that came as a result of conversation.
So thanks, Madam Chair, and as you pointed out, it led to the, our thoughts. I think we all spoke on it about what can be done in real time right away to help our community and our children get the activity that they need. We know that we have many facilities here that are closed in our gymnasiums across CBRM at 3 p.m. I would be making a motion that staff be directed to meet with the appropriate people at the school administration level, and that could also include the MLAs from the area as well, all MLAs in CBRM actually, because I think it affects every child in CBRM. So I think they should be included in that conversation and talk about the art of the possible and how these buildings can be opened and properly chaperoned and coached for basketball and the likes, volleyball, whatever other sports that we have in those facilities that already built. The heat is left on every evening. You got to turn the lights on a little bit, but I think that would be about it, along with some janitorial expenses. But I think groups and organizations would be happy to raise a few bucks to help offset that as well. Especially when I think of a group like Basketball Cape Breton. They rented our facility in Bridgeport, the Bridgeport School, as most can recall, and they had heating bills of $3,000 for the year, and it just became too much for them. So, the heat is on in these buildings, so I really think we have to sit down, Marie, and staff who you think are appropriate to meet with these people. And please, I'd ask you to talk to Lauren and Steve as well. They may be able to help, with the conversation on who you should speak to directly. And I so move. Thank you.
Second.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councillor Bruckschweiger and seconded by Councillor Gillespie. And I'll reread the motion. I'm going to summarize, I think, a little bit. So the motion on the floor is for staff to be directed to meet with school administration and Cape Breton MLAs in regards to what options are available for granting access to court facilities for local groups and organizations.
Perfect. Thank you.
I just want to check. Do we got? I didn't exactly write that down. So.
I think we're looking at
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And that was moved by Councillor Bruckschweiger and seconded by Gillespie.
Madam Chair, I didn't include CBU, and we brought that up so that they'd also meet with people at CBU about what we can do at the Canada Games complex as well. Thank you.
Easy omission. So staff directed to meet with school administration, MLAs, and CBU administration on what options are available for granting access for use of court facilities.
Perfect.
Okay, discussion on the motion.
Question?
Question's been called. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those against, no. Motion is moved. Carried. Okay, so we are now On to the next agenda item, which is 8.1, and it's an update on FOIPOP File 93. So I'll call on the regional solicitor to introduce the issue.
Yes, I was asked to give an update on this FOIPOP application. We received a application for access to documents regarding port matters. The external counsel who's dealing with the port matters was of the opinion that the documents were confidential and exempt from disclosure. We made that representation to the FOIPOP office. The exemptions were that it was harmful to the financial interest of the municipality, of the third parties, and that it was an unreasonable invasion of privacy of the third parties. The FOIPOP office disagreed with that. They didn't agree that they were exempt from disclosure, and they recommended that we disclose all the documents in their entirety. We have since responded to the FOIPOP office and committed to look at the documents again with an eye to disclosure. I think we should note that they took 5 years to give a decision on this. So what we deemed confidential then may not be confidential now, just from the passage of time. So we're going to go back and do a more fulsome review with an eye to disclosure and take into account some of the recommendations they made. So we've given that to that indication to the FOIPOP office and to the applicant. We actually just today we received a correspondence from the FOIPOP office because we didn't agree with disclosing the records right away. They deemed it a refusal, so the applicant has been notified that we basically refused, and they have the ability now to make an application to court if they don't agree with it. We've asked for 60 days to go through the records again. Given that it was 5 years for them to come back with a decision, we didn't think the 60 days was unreasonable, that we would go through and basically we expect that a lot of the records will be disclosed, just passage of time really. So that's the update on that.
Councillor Parish.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. One word that caught me off guard there is you're going through them again. Why are we not releasing the information of 862 pages to the general public or to even us? I'm as in the dark about this now as I was in 2017, 2015, 2019. What is being hidden? What if you're saying certain information that might not be prevalent now that was 5 years ago? What's the difference if it's a FOIPOP and the general public is supposed to know? I don't want to speak for everyone sitting around this table, but every one of us that ran here at some point used the campaign slogan as transparency. So I think it's time as a whole, with a clean slate, that we give the people what they want.
Well, I guess why we're going through them again, we still believe that we don't necessarily agree with the FOIPOP office that they were not exempt from disclosure. So what we are going through again to see if, yes, okay, 5 years, maybe some of the stuff isn't confidential now. We would give that up. Anything else that we deem, okay, looking at the recommendations from the FOIPOP office, if, maybe they're not, we will disclose those as well. There may be some records that we say, yeah, we still believe they're confidential, and we won't disclose. I don't know. The person that was dealing with the port issues is going through them with hopefully with an eye to disclose as much as we can. It might be everything. I don't know, but that's we believe they were exempt. We still believe that we met the exemption. The FOIPOP office has a different view, but they can only make recommendations. And the applicant, if they are not happy, they have the ability to go to court and say, hey, we don't agree.
Didn't they already tell us that we broke the law on this one, that we didn't release the information? I'm looking for clarity on that. I thought I read that in Gogan's report that you gave us, and on the other end of the spectrum, how come he's not here tonight presenting this?
He wasn't available. when you say broke the law, the FOIPOP legislation has exemptions under it, right? There's certain exemptions to disclosure. So if it meets those exemptions, you're allowed to withhold them. That's the FOIPOP legislation. We feel that they met the exemptions. The FOIPOP office doesn't. So in that sense, they're saying, okay, we don't feel that they're exempt, so yes, then you're not meeting the obligations of the MGA because they feel that they're not exempt. We felt that they were. So, you know, break the law. We got clarification from them on what they think the interpretation is. But yeah, we're going to look and we're going to take some of their recommendations and we're going to go through them and disclose what we can, what we feel are not confidential. And there's another step if there has to be. There's a court process and they will determine, you know, if they are indeed exempt or not, if there's any documents left. But I mean, 60 days doesn't seem like a long time to do that. There's, like you say, there's 800 pages of records to go through those. We waited 5 years for a decision. We're trying to do this as quick as possible, but I mean, we're into the holidays and everything, so we're doing that. And if there's ones that we can disclose before that, we will. We're not just going to wait till the 60 days. If there's things that come up as, okay, yeah, we can disclose this, we can disclose this, we can disclose this, we will.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon Mcdonald.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. So I read Gogan's report. I read all the FOIPOP commission, the report from the commission on the FOIPOP. And when you redact 862 pages, it allows everybody in the public to wonder what the heck we're hiding. And I, for one, wonder what we're hiding when we're redacting that much information from a report that the taxpayers are asking. They want to know the information. People like myself, we want to know the information. We're still bucking the system. You said we have 5 years. They took 5 years for them to reply back. So that gave us 5 more years that we were able to come up with something to be able to find out what we were doing wrong. And, you know, we're still putting out money in legal fees to fight the FOIPOP because we had to go again, write this, which was rejected by the commission, obviously, because they're telling us that we didn't make the deadline to get the recommendations looked at. I suggest that the municipality throw it out on the table. Let them see what they want to see. Let this new council get away from the trouble that previous councils have been dealing with, and let us move on. And we're spending too much time fighting over this kind of an issue when it's public information, and they should be able to get that information directly from the Cbrm. And I fully agree with the recommendations from the commission, and this stuff should be put forward. And I don't believe as a Cbrm that we should be putting out money to outside legal corporations to come up with information that was delayed and not being accepted. It's, you know, we're still fighting the FOIPOP when we shouldn't be. I believe that as a council and as a municipality, you know, taxpayers have the right to know what's being said. And I agree that there's legal issues in there and you can't disclose certain parts of it. But 862 pages is unreasonable to think that there's something in there that's not being hidden. And I, for one, would suggest that this here, lay it out on the table. Let's move on. Let everybody see what's there and get over it. And let's move on with business to go forward, because if not, we're going to still be sitting here in a year's time fighting what's happened in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Is there further discussion?
I have a question.
Councillor Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I guess outside of non-disclosure agreements, Dimitri, I guess I point the question to you. Outside of non-disclosure agreements with whatever companies that we were dealing with at this particular issue involving the port, are we just reviewing, as the FOIPOP Commissioner just reviewed emails, for example? Is that what's in question there, emails versus non-disclosure agreements, which certainly can't go public?
There's a multitude of different kinds of documents. There's emails, there's agreements, there's things that are protected by NDAs. Now, what the FOIPOP office said is that, you know, you probably could have did a more deeper dive into the documents, maybe redact it more, maybe provide it more, everything just a wholesale, say it's, you know, exempt. So we're going to look at that as well. We're going to take their recommendations to do that. You know, I don't think we're bucking the system. We're working within the system. We're working within the FOIPOP legislation, and we're doing, you know, on behalf of the municipality what we think we should do. You know, if council wants everything put out on the table, you know, you guys can say that. I would be worried that there's things that are probably protected by NDAs that we might get in trouble for, that if that's the reason that we're, you know.
I wouldn't think outside of an NDA that the FOIPOP office commissioner would want us to disclose that information, because why sign an NDA in the first place? As business sensitivity issues that are done between two parties of such a sensitivity, that's why you sign a non-disclosure. So
Well,
I can't see anybody wanting us to release that.
The FOIPOP office takes the view that if you're going to do business with the municipality, that, you know, you should be subject to disclosure. I would think that the companies that we're talking about probably would take a different view of it if we signed a non-disclosure agreement with them. That's why we're going through them again. Like I said, some of the documents may be irrelevant now. It's 5 years after the application, so I don't know what's still relevant or not. But it's our hope that most, if not all, the documents will be disclosed.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just end off by just reading an excerpt from Mr. Gogan's report. It's on page 2 of 3, in the middle paragraph, the last sentence. This process is ongoing. However, we can advise that this secondary review of the withheld documentation, in light of both the passage of time as well as consideration of the report, will likely, and I reiterate, will likely result in a release of all or a significant portion of these documents. If that's being expressed by our solicitor, that in all likelihood we will, then why prolong it, I guess, is the ultimate question. That will, in Councillor Mcdonald's array, would certainly cost more money. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just going through the reports there, regardless of when it was submitted, I'm suggesting that there was a certain chain of command that would follow for whoever would actually write the report or submit the documentation. So if I wrote it, for example, I just don't stamp it and send it off to the FOIPOP Commission. I'm sure it would come through the solicitor's office and the like. So am I correct in assuming that, Mr. Kachafanis?
This one was different than most of the FOIPOPs. Most of the FOIPOPs are dealt with, Deborah Campbell is the FOIPOP administrator, so between her and myself, we usually review most. It was determined by the former CAO that because this was related to the port, that the external port council had a better handle on these documents, so it was tasked to him to do the FOIPOP request.
So the Cbrm, although we're being, it's coming back to us now, it wasn't really our ball in the first place.
I guess he was working on behalf of Cbrm, so as far as the FOIPOP office is concerned, it's Cbrm, but it was done externally.
Yeah, so it wasn't proofread by us before it was sent off. That's an important point. It really is, because now we're the ones being labeled as not disclosing the information. So that said, so we're really dealing with two items here, if I understand you, sir, that the 60 days or the time is up, so we have to address that, how we go about responding to the report. And my second question is, and I'll ask you to address both if you would, please.
Sure.
So if in a perfect world they accept our report in the 60 days or whatever, and it comes back, or they still don't like what we offer. So is it then incumbent on the commission to take CBRM to court, or how does the court process get in vogue here?
The FOIPOP office can only make recommendations, and what they've said now is that, okay, you didn't take our recommendation to disclose it right away, so we're saying that you refused, we're done. So now it's between you and the applicant. So they're not gonna, whether they're not gonna like our 60 days or unlike it, they're saying, okay, we're done, because you didn't follow our recommendations. So now it's, the applicant has the right to take it to court, if she doesn't want to wait the 60 days to see, or he, or, you know, what the documents reveal. They can go to court right now and make an application to have them disclosed.
Thank you.
Councillor Cyril Mcdonald on your first.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. I think there's a couple of things here, and I'll, you know, Councillor Parsons alludes to our NDAs or non-disclosure agreements. I can't imagine anybody would say, you know, though you need to share those. That's why you sign them. That's why you sign them. They're public and they're private. But to withhold 862 pages of public information 5 years ago was unacceptable, and it's certainly unacceptable today. So I echo what Councillor Gordon McDonald said, and I think that we need to move forward on this and, you know, get it, let the past be the past, let the previous council and mayor, you know, that was 5 years ago. We're 5 years ahead now. We're many new faces around the table. I don't think we should have to wear what previous decisions made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Councillor Gillespie on your first.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to Dimitri Ketchevanis. In a situation where we, as it has been said, lay everything on the table and an agreement has been signed, what legal ramifications would happen if we disclose something from a non-disclosure agreement?
Well, I guess potentially if the person that we signed the non-disclosure agreement with still deems that that's confidential information, they could sue us for breach of the non-disclosure agreement.
So it's actually prudent for us to make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's and review the information before we release it, because if not, we could be in a situation where we're now being sued.
I think that's why we want to go through them again, and I don't think it's to hide anything, but it's to make sure that we're not disclosing anything that can't be disclosed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gillespie. Councillor Parish on your second.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Two parts. First part, I guess, looking for a little clarification. You say going through them again, but in Mr. Gogan's report here, the process is ongoing. However, we can advise that this secondary review. So are you telling me you're going to go through them a third time? Did he do the first report, pay him $250,000, he did the second report, and now you as the CBRM solicitor want to go through it a third time? Because I'll just follow that up before you speak, sir. Perception here goes a hell of a lot farther with the general public than it does, say, you or Mr. Gogan, who get to see or be privy to this information when nobody else does. The perception outside Center 200 right now, and anybody watching at home, is that we're up to no good. So I feel it's up to us to prove to them, give them the information they want, and it is what it is. If we made mistakes, we got to wear it, right? Thank you.
Respond to that?
Sure.
Okay, I'm not sure on what you meant by the 250,000.
Well, what did we pay Mr. Gogan? I'm sure he didn't offer his services up to us for free. I was told $250,000 is what this man got to write that two-page report or do the faux pop that they said is that we broke, that we didn't do what we were supposed to do. So
okay,
we're paying somebody to do something we kind of expect good results.
Well, Councillor, I don't have the number here, but I can tell you it wasn't $250,000 to do whatever he did.
Okay.
I guess our job, if we do it internally and if we hire someone to do it, is to look at the documents and make a determination of whether we think they should be disclosed or not. If, you know, your council can make a motion here tonight to give them all the documents, and you do that knowing full well that there could be ramifications. But if council wants to do that, we will abide by the council decision to do that. If you make a motion to say disclose everything right now, and what happens, happens. We are working on your behalf, on behalf of council, to be prudent and make sure that things don't get disclosed that they shouldn't be. That doesn't mean that we're hiding things. There's going to be times when information's not disclosed. We just had a FOIPOP application that went to court. The person wanted information that we didn't think should be disclosed, that it was exempt. The court agreed with us it was exempt, and they didn't disclose it. Does that mean we're hiding it? No, it means that there's reasons in the FOIPOP legislation why things are and aren't exempt. That's part of the FOIPOP legislation, the exemptions. We don't make them up. We look at the legislation and we say, okay, do we think that this is documentation that can and should be disclosed? And we do that on behalf of the municipality, on behalf of council. We do that in every FOIPOP application. There's some things we redact. There's most of the documents that we disclose, but in certain cases we're going to redact, and in certain cases we're going to say no, we're not disclosing the document. That's why there is the process. That's why there's the FOIPOP office and ultimately the court.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Green on your first.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to the solicitor, I just have a few questions here, just for clarification purpose. When you say the documents may in fact be released as a result of a timeline of 5-6 years, whatever the timeline is, I'm just wondering, when you say they're going to be released, and I'm always mindful of liability issues for council, and having served on previous boards and understand the liability issues by disclosing information. I wouldn't suggest that we blanket anything that we do as a council. I would caution any councillor to think that we are hiding anything. Any councillor here is privy to that information. If they want it, they can go and see it. So I would caution any councillor, to blanket anything, throw anything out there, because who we're protecting at the end of the day is more than likely businesses and private citizens. So that information is not something you just want to throw around at will. And you mentioned the NDAs that we sign with different companies. If we release that information, and it's very, very evident that we would, we could face liability, and we could be in litigation for years. And you think you're tough now. I mean, when somebody wants to take millions of dollars from the Cbrm, then we're going to feel it for sure, and our citizens are going to say, you weren't very very responsible when you made the decision to just throw things out there. What's the timeline for our 60 days? That's the first question. And after that 60-day review, hearing what you've said in terms of the requester for the FOIPOP, that at that particular time, that individual or those individuals can take Cbrm to court, and we'll deal with it at that time, obviously. But what's the timeline on the 60 days? And in your own opinion, after knowing this case or this file, do you see the 800 pages that they're saying we withhold or withheld? Do you see a large portion of those being released, and if so, when?
Okay. Just for clarification, I wasn't involved in the file, right? It was all the external port counsel. So my discussions on this have been with him, right, and his opinions on what can be disclosed. What we're dealing with is business agreements with companies that we were trying to, work with respect to port development. Some of it, when I say the passage of time, what I mean is that some of it may have gone by the wayside now, okay? We're not interested, they're not interested, whatever, it's not happening. So that stuff can be disclosed, whether it's, you know, it might have been confidential 5 years ago, it's probably not confidential now if it's, you know, not still in play. The 60 days was something that we said, okay, what's reasonable with trying to get the applicant information, if there's information to be had. We've decided is that, okay, he's going to go through them the second time, right? The first time was way back when the application was made 5 years ago, right? So he's going to go through them again, and as we're going to release them in stages, right? If there's stuff that can be released right away, we're not going to wait 60 days, okay? 60 days is basically our drop dead, what we said, we've committed to say, okay, we're going to get whatever we're disclosing out within 60 days. Okay. If the applicant doesn't like that, they can go to court right now. They can make an application right now, or if they can wait and see what documents are disclosed. And if they say, well, no, that's not enough. If it's 200 pages or 400 pages, and they want the other 4, they can go to court then. Right? So they can wait and see. It's up to the applicant now. The FOIPOP office is out of it. They said, okay, we've made our recommendations. We're done. Okay, so the 60 days is our timeline.
Thank you. Councillor Eldon Mcdonald on your first.
Thanks very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just, I guess, in regards to a number of comments that are being made, it's not an easy position, as I'm sure through you to our clerk, Deborah Campbell, when she's going through these FOIPOPs, and in particular this one being on the port file, was done by outside counsel, but they're not easy to deal with on the best day. Many of them take a long time to go through the various pages and information and gathering that information. I can respect that, you know, in my 8 years here, I've never made a decision around this council table that's hid anything from anybody. Now, have I taken part in camera meetings? Absolutely. Those things are necessary to have happen, especially when you're dealing with non-disclosure agreements. And in this particular file, when you're looking at 800 and some pages, to just throw it all out there so that everybody has it, in my opinion, would be irresponsible. We're dealing with private companies, and going back 5 years ago, I can tell you that the lead people on this file that were trying to move this project forward to get final stages in place, we're dealing with multiple companies around the world. Shipping companies, operating companies, builders, financiers, all of that information could be within this documentation that they're looking for. If it should be disclosed, and there's no issue with it, then I absolutely expect our staff to go through that, look at it, and disclose every ounce of information that should be disclosed. But to just go and say there's 885 pages, throw it out there and let the public have it, when you have people that have spent tens of millions of dollars of their time, their effort, their money around this world on our behalf, our only option in this game is the land. We own the land that the terminal would be built on. This is a private contract with private entities dealing with private companies around the world. And I think we should take very serious to make sure that if we're disclosing that information, we're not putting any information out there that's going to jeopardize the last 5 or 6 years' work of that company. And if it's the passage of time, I can understand. I can go back 5 years ago. We had no shippers, to my knowledge anyway, that were confirmed to anything. That may be different today, which means the people that we were trying to negotiate 5 years ago, they may be out of the picture, as Dimitri said, to say, yeah, we had those discussions 5 years ago, we're not interested. So you can close that today. But to disclose that in the middle of still negotiating with them to possibly be one of our major partners would be irresponsible. Now, I don't know myself. I don't know what's in the emails. I don't know who the emails are from. I don't know if they're from previous mayor and council. I don't know if they're from staff. I don't know if they're from global shipping agencies. I don't know if they're from global financiers. I have no idea who these emails are for. But we better make sure, as Councillor Gillespie said, that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's to make sure when we do release the information out, that we're not jeopardizing this project that's been ongoing for many years, that a lot of people have spent a lot of money on. A lot of people think it's Cbrm spending their money. We don't have any money in this. This isn't our project. This is a private entity, and that I think entity deserves the respect of allowing that file to be gone through and looked at to make sure that what's being released is not going to jeopardize any of their proprietary negotiations or discussions with, as I say, people around the world that are involved in this project. But if it's simple emails as referenced in the commissioner's report, then absolutely they should be released, and they should be released in their entirety if it's not going to jeopardize anything. But I think we need to allow our staff to go through to make sure we're not going to just release everything, find out we've jeopardized something on behalf of a company on the other side of the world that then comes back after us for that. And I think that's just being responsible to make sure that what we're doing. So I fully support going through this, have it out in the time frame that we can get it out as early as possible. And if some of it takes up to 60 days and that's the best we can do, then I support that. But if we can get stuff out in the next 15 or 20 days, and that's what should happen. But nothing should be held back that meets being disclosed without jeopardizing any of the private partners or global partners that have been working on this project. And that's where I would be on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mcdonald. Councillor Bruckschweiger on your first.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and I guess I just want to say that I agree with almost everything, just about everything that Eldon said, I do. You know, it's a difficult situation when municipal government decides that they have to get involved in economic development. And that's where we found ourselves, getting involved in the real economic development, trying to find ways that we could help this community back then to survive. And there wasn't much on the horizon, not the projects or the money that's being spent in the community today. So, you know, when we get out there, and myself, I can speak for myself, being involved for as long as I have been in politics, it was always my position to be honest and open and fair and tell the residents everything. But we learned about these non-disclosure agreements. We knew that there was somebody else close by who was trying to get the same business that we were trying to seek. Okay, we had somebody just up the line who wanted to start a container terminal. They were not in the public eye whatsoever as far as what they were doing. Nobody was asking questions, right? But when it came to this here particular project, we were in the public eye. And for us, I will never take the chance of putting the taxpayers in Cbrm, you know, in that kind of a risk situation. And I think what I've heard here today, and, you know, I can get into this a little more, but I think our solicitor, and I believe based on our solicitor's recommendation, I'm sure there's been a discussion with our administration staff that they're in agreement with the go forward here. And it's important for me, I've heard from the solicitor, God, not terrible. You know, I want to hear from staff as well on this, okay? It's important that all council understands where we could lie by releasing everything. It's less than 30 days. It's by the end of the year, I think, the first bunch of stuff will be released. And then the end of January, in Mr. Gogan's report, where the balance, some of it may be redacted because of the confidentiality of some of it, but it's going to be released. You know, when I hear the story about a new council wanting to start with a clear slate, and I've seen a lot of councillors come and go in my time, right? And it's unfortunate that when a new council comes in, you are part of decisions in the past. And I'm still very confident that something is going to happen with this container terminal, and sooner rather than later, okay? And I know that all that stuff that went on over the years, when this finally takes place, I'm sure this full council is going to take part in that success story. I'm confident that you will, everybody around the table. So I just say decisions today, you know, can affect us. And, you know, when you heard of some of the shippers and the people that were involved in this thing, right, you can easily find out when they're doing negotiations how you could end up in serious legal troubles. So non-disclosure agreements are a pretty serious thing, and that's my thoughts on this, my early thoughts. You know, we're the ones that stand, and it's not easy sometimes to make these decisions. It never is. You want to be as open as possible, but unfortunately, as I said, you know, it's hard to get there on certain issues right away, and this was one of them. You know, the former mayor and council, we've met with Barbuski and company on many occasions on this file. It's my hope that maybe, Marie, that something can be set up in the near future where this council can get an update on where everything stands today. And if that can be set up soon, that would be, I think, a great idea as well for everybody to have that chance to ask questions and find out where things stand presently. So I personally will be supporting what we have here going forward. I won't be supporting release and everything until I get a clear sense from our legal department and senior staff that you're in agreement with this being released. So I'd ask Marie if you could comment on behalf of staff as well, please. Thank you.
So my comments would be that unfortunately, staff, our solicitor was not involved in this file. So we cannot say with confidence that by releasing all of this information that there's not proprietary information in that we would not be sued for. Now, do we feel that because 5 years have passed, a lot of it will be released? I'm pretty confident that that's going to happen. But to say carte blanche to release all the information, I'm definitely not confident in that. I would suspect that there will be some information. There's been a lot of money spent on proposals from companies. And even if those proposals are dead, that's a lot of work that has gone into those that other people could use. And I would say that we would be sued if we release that. Again, I'm confident in the solicitor's recommendation that we wait for the second review. As far as Mr. Barbucci, I know he has been in contact and he is looking to do an update with this new council as soon as we can make the time. So absolutely, I think that's important, but I support the solicitor in his decision.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon Mcdonald on your second.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. When I said throw it all on the table, I believe I indicated that I understood that what the legal agreements and stuff like that are, and I understand that some of that stuff has to be redacted. But nobody's going to convince me that 862 pages of redaction was a proper way to proceed on this FOIPOP. On the recommendation from the commission, they made 4 recommendations for the CBRM, and then when I read Gogan's report, he basically suggests that that's what they're going to follow. But they haven't disclosed that information. So, you know, the commission has said today that the CBRM hasn't met their commitment to getting the information out to, or following the recommendations of the commission. This is a very important file, and I don't know if everybody else listens to the voice of public opinion, but the voice of public opinion out there says that they feel that the CBRM is hiding information in this specific report. And it's kind of hard for us as a council to sit around and say 862 pages of redacted material didn't hide something that the public felt like they should be knowing about. And, you know, it falls back on each and every one of us as councillors here in the CBRM. So I feel that without the non-disclosure agreements, I believe, and I still say, that everything should be laid out on the table, and the public should get to know what's there. I mean, it's Gogan is basically agreeing with what the commission says, but yet just not following the procedures to get it done on a timely basis. And I believe, you know, in the interest of transparency, I believe that's what we as a council need to do. And the municipality, I think we need to get those transparencies out there so, you know, we can start regaining the trust of the public opinion out there. And because right now, and when you talk about these files and you go outside this area, you know, the public have an opinion, and it's not a positive opinion. So, you know, and And I feel like, and I understand, Councillor Brushwagger, about new councils coming in have to accept the roles and the responsibilities of council, of previous councils, but this is a big issue. And it's not one that's been going away. It's obviously been on the go for 5 years. And I mean, we've had lots of time as council to be able to get this information out to the parties that have been asking for it. And, you know, I am here for transparency, and I know, and I believe that as taxpayers, they got the rights to know. And I heard another statement that we have no money invested in this, but I believe there's money invested. I believe over the years and all the transactions that have happened, I believe the CBRM has a big interest in this file. So, you know, I think in the best interest of council, and I agree, we don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we're going to have all kinds of lawsuits and things of that nature, but still, we have to be transparent.
And that's time, Councillor Mcdonald.
As a council.
That's time.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
And we now, and thank you, Councillor Mcdonald. We now go on the second turn for Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to go back to my earlier comments about the chain of command here. You know, it would be very easy to point fingers where they, you know, the board did it and we didn't know about it until we got the FOIPOP report and all this. But you know what? Hopefully we can learn from this that, you know, when the FOIPOP report came back, it came back on us. We're wearing it. So, you know, we can't say, well, they did it. But one positive thing that I would like to take from this going forward is that anything that we're responsible for going forward, that we proofread it before it's sent out. That so when it comes back, that it isn't a mystery to us that, well, we didn't know that wasn't in there. We didn't know that was in there. But and I know I'm running out of time, so the last point that I do want to make is that as far as
you still have a minute, Councillor
turning
Edwards.
over everything carte blanche, I think we should be following our solicitor's advice. This is obviously a legal item, and but again, so turning over everything, you know, that would be up to our solicitors. But again, learning going forward, if we're going to wear it, if we're going to be responsible for it, that we have to stamp it before it's sent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Parsons on your second.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd just like to close my saying on this is that we pay lawyers for a reason. Sometimes we like them, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we like what they say, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we don't like what they cost. But at the end of the day, they're here for our protection. Not only our protection at the table, but the protection of all of CBRM. I will never support giving out 862 pages without a thorough, and I tell you why I say that. In the business world, the business community, when you sign an NDA, if we talk about setting precedents, if we set a precedent here and throw everything on the table, which we're liable for, we will not attract any business in the future coming to Cape Breton. Why? Because we will not be seen as being trusted. You don't sign an NDA and turn around when it don't suit you and throw it out for public scrutiny. It's just not the way the business world works. That's why NDAs are part of the business world. Through negotiations, we're talking about some big companies here. And you just don't throw agreements out on the table for somebody to scrutinize for the sake of scrutinizing it. This is very important in the future, and I think let's listen to our solicitors in terms of their recommendation. Take the 60 days. If the applicant wants to go to the Supreme Court, then we can't control that. But we can control what we put out there. And I think we should take our due diligence, watch what we're putting out there. At the same time, whatever can go out for transparency reasons, let's get it out there as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Is there any other discussion? Oh, question. Marie?
I guess just as part of the history, the decision at the time was to give the mayor the authority to handle the port file. You are the board. You can have those documents. The decision at that time was to keep it very closed in the mayor's office. He signed the non-disclosure agreements. If you want to sign non-disclosure agreements as a board and come in and sit with the clerk and look at that file, you are more than welcome. There is nothing that we are trying to hide. We are trying to protect the board here. If you would like to see those documents, make an appointment with the clerk. Go in and see those documents and sign a non-disclosure agreement. So again, it was for the protection of this board because it would not have been the first time that information in an in-camera session was leaked to the public. And that's what it was put in place for protection for this council.
Thank you, Marie. Is there any, there is no motion on the floor, so it's just, is there any other discussion? Okay, with no further discussion. No, no motion. So I'd just like to reiterate, as expressed by our CFO, council has at their discretion the ability to view all the documents in question. I myself, I will agree, I am a little disappointed in the outside firm representation that they weren't here to present to us to provide that little extra bit of clarity. That would have been, I'm sure, appreciated by all of council and should not go unnoted. On a positive note, as referred to by Councillor Parsons, that it is under Gogan's impression that the majority of these documents will be released. And whether it was a CBRM error, whether it was a contracted error, we are in the process of rectifying it the best of our ability at the moment. And I believe staff has made it very clear that on a go forward in the release within the next 60 days, everything will be released publicly. That does not hold us responsible litigation-wise. If it doesn't hold CBRM in the position of litigation, it's my understanding that those documents would be released. Would I be correct, Solicitor?
Anything that wouldn't hold us litigation-wise and that we wouldn't say is still confidential, like whether it's litigation-wise or not, if it's still deemed to be confidential, then we probably wouldn't release that.
That falls within the guidelines, the FOIPOP?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. On that note, we will now move on to, where are we? 9.1, financial statements. These are for information only, but our CFO, Jennifer, is available for any questions anyone may have. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Through you to the CFO, I do have several questions in regards to the information that's provided, and more for clarity than anything, because I'm not an accountant, and so I don't consider myself to be a bean counter. So I need some clarification here.
I've never counted beans.
When I look at wages in some of these statements, some of them are very clear. For example, the CAO is very clear. I can understand those wages. But it's not very clear to me when I go to the legal one, and it shows a salary of $234,240. My question would be, who does this cover? Because my understanding the legal department has a solicitor and 4 employees below him. So that doesn't look like that would be the salary for 5 employees. So I'm not sure what those wages include.
Yep, that includes the wages for the legal department to date for all staff reporting under that department. So that would be our solicitor, his legal secretary, paralegals, and legal researcher.
So that's right up till October 31st?
That's correct.
Okay. In the same category, the legal department, I see liability insurance of $1.347 million. That liability insurance, I'm assuming that's for more than just the legal department?
That's the liability insurance premium for the entire year for the whole municipality insurance policy. So that includes our premiums for vehicle insurance, for our building contents, and general liability insurance.
The human resource, would be the same question with the wages. Is that for the entire human resource department?
Yes, it is.
And if I can go right back to the last page of the agenda, the Sydney Port Development Association Corporation. When I see variance to budget, and we're talking about budget till October 31st, correct?
Yes.
When I see variance to budgets, and they're in brackets, is that my understanding if that, to date, that money has not been used?
That's correct. They're under budget in that category.
Okay, so I draw council's attention to wages on that particular one, where October 31st, and we all know what we were in the pandemic. The port was reporting that the wages to date as of October 31st was $299,897. So that left them a variance of $295,249, which of course we know there's not going to be a turnaround from October to now with the pandemic. So I don't see that those monies necessarily being used. And if you go all the way down the entire file there, the entire column of the variance to budget, and when you get to the total, the total at the very end, as of October 31st, it's saying that the variance was $1,380,309. Am I correct when I say that that was the variance and that was money that wasn't used as of October 31st?
Yes.
So I know we can't do much about past, and I've heard it here tonight that, you know, we wear things that council's done before us, but I guess I'm wearing the decision I made with reference to our last meeting in terms of the ask for the Port Authority when they asked to use a reserve fund, when I see that they had a variance of $1,300,000 on October 31st. So I fault myself for that, for not picking that up. Perhaps, you know, sleep at the wheel, whatever you want to say, but I fault myself for that. And I just say that, you know, shame on me because I should have caught that. I'm much wiser than that. I generally do my homework, and I really dropped the ball on that one. And I just wonder why the Port Authority came in looking for that reserve trust fund when they were in a negative balance that they didn't use of $1,380,000. Just a comment.
Yep, no, that's, it's understandable that it would be read that way. The 1.3 million, though, is only what has not been spent in expenses. If you look above, they're under budget by 2.2 million in revenue. So they do have an operating loss to date of 831,000. The bottom line. They haven't, while they've saved 1.3 million, they've also lost 2.2 million in revenue. So you have to look at the net difference.
And that would be time for Councillor Green, but you can come back for a second if you like. Any other? Councillor Mcdonald, Gordon Mcdonald.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I just have one question, and it's just for my own clarity. In some of the statement of expenditures, I see under line 6170, I see promotion. What's promotion? And just the one I'm on is page 137 with fire services, and I see it in a couple of other of those expenditures as well.
Yeah, each department has their own definition for what they would consider to be promotional related expenses. For fire services, for example, Fire Prevention Week would certainly be a large component of what they would spend on promotional activities.
And that's different than advertising?
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Okay, well, thank you, CFO, and you finally got a whole bunch of questions instead of waiting until the very end and everyone's silent.
Point of
Okay.
privilege, Deputy Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor Gillespie.
All of you, of course, have received a little bag. This bag has become a little tradition with me. Every year, I give senior staff and my colleagues a little gift. It's a joke, of course. I'm just trying to be a little, light. But the mask inside this bag was made locally. It is a 3-ply mask made of cotton, very breathable. And for those new councillors who are here, it has your council district number on it, just in case you forget. Also, there is a chocolate bar inside. I did not make the chocolate bar, so feel free to eat it. It is a Lindor chocolate.
If I can cut in, it may not be appropriate to say what's on that chocolate
No,
bar.
I definitely am not.
It is not foul language for the record, but not necessarily
And
professional.
that also comes in a little sock with your number on it as well, just in case you may want to put that in your pocket. But it is something that I've been doing over the last number of years, and as Darren and Eldon can attest to, sometimes they go over well and sometimes they don't. But it's just a little lighthearted way for me to say it is a pleasure and a privilege to work with you. Thank you.
Here, here.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Gillespie. And in the terms of transparency, no worries, I will post a photo of my chocolate bar on my private Facebook page. And on that note, with
Motion to adjourn.
thank you, no further business, meeting is adjourned.